The year is 2025. The Earth is in chaos. The skies are burning, cities are collapsing, and aliens are wiping humanity off the map. 2038. A breakthrough occurs. The human genetic code is hacked. The first improved soldiers are born. New fighters turn the tide of war. 2050. The world meets a new order. A genetic test. Only the worthy receive an injection. Superpowers awaken. The gene era rules the world. The year is 2137. The boy's name is Shiao, and everything will be decided now. Third year of high school. The tests begin. Glory and honor await. Behind them hides duty, fear, and the inevitability of the fight against alien invaders. Gene soldier or scientist, the only way is a genetic test. To miss the chance means to disappear, to become trash, deprived of power, and a future. From early childhood, lessons, exams, all for the sake of the coveted pass to participate in the gene test. Physical activity every day, blood, sweat, abrasions. The body must be perfect. Today is that day. Fate will put things in their place, and the past will be left behind. Shiao stands in the hallway, the phone shaking in his hand, his mother's voice sounding anxious. His mother reminds him of the risk. The drug has a 1% mortality rate. Shiao is confident. The gene lines have already been passed. The way back is erased. His scores, 597, 483 on the first line, 395 on the second. The result is higher than expected. Many have not even passed these tests. There is a risk, but it is minimal. Genetic rejection is recorded only in one case out of 100. The mother does not argue. The voice of the system sounds, the students are called to the final genetic stage, a test and an injection. Shiao says goodbye and reassures his mother, hangs up, and enters the hall. In the hall, students whisper among themselves. The air is filled with nervousness, hope, and anticipation of future mutations. Some people dream of an extreme type because it is easier to develop, and strength comes faster than with others. Some hope for special mutations, others just want to awaken at least something. Shiao watches silently. It is clear from their faces that everyone is in the same mood, a mixture of ambition and fear. The system announces Student J6122 has been summoned to room 25 for the final stage. The gene injection. Biometrics confirmed. Fingerprints matched 99.7%. Iris matched 99.5%. Identity confirmed. Shiao enters the room, his body tense, thinking about his future type. An extreme type that enhances physical strength, or an exceptional type with unique abilities. However, the strange abilities are frightening. They are weak, ineffective, and become a laughing stock after awakening. An image flashes through my head of what it would be like to awaken. X-ray vision, looking through walls, through clothes, through secrets. He smiles involuntarily, imagining the girls, but inside he is still nervous, even though he looks calm. Nearby, students are arguing. One is afraid, the other is laughing. The guy saw photos on the internet of those who were disfigured by an unsuccessful injection. There is a 1% mortality rate. The other one assures that, on the other hand, there is a 99% chance of successful awakening. And from that moment on, a wonderful life will begin. In this room, not just a test begins, but a transition from one life to a completely different one. But still, there is a big difference between 0 and 1%. The next number is J12226. Student Chow. The guy laughs, confident in success. He will definitely get cool abilities. His friends are witnesses. The atmosphere in the hall is tense. The students' eyes are full of hope. Everyone expects the awakening to pass without tragedy. Shiao stands at the entrance to Section 25. There is only one thought in his head. The day has come. There is no other way. Finally, this day has come. So many years of effort for one day. He is about to knock on the door. And suddenly, a flash, a crack, a scream. An explosion behind him interrupts the movement. He turns around. One of the students is on fire. Flames are consuming his body. Blood-curdling screams. Medics rush to the scene. A doctor shouts that it is a side effect of the injection. The fire needs to be put out. Another reaches for the drug, his hands shaking. Fire extinguishers fill the space with foam. The flames go out. But the guy doesn't move anymore. The body is charred. This is the fifth one today. Jean did not accept the injection. Exceptional fire type. Unstable as before. The friends of the deceased scream in horror and retreat. In their eyes, shock, fear, awareness of the end. The medic shakes his head. The body is carefully placed in a black bag. Life is gone in a couple of seconds. Shiao freezes. His gaze slides from the bag to the door of Section 25. One thought runs through his head. He was alive, a minute ago. The heart is thundering. Thoughts are confused. Death is near. It is closer than it seemed. It is real. And it is random. He stands motionless. Then, should he enter? Or should he run away and disappear from this system forever? The answer comes from within. Yes, because death is better than becoming a nobody in the Jean era. Better to die than to live in the shadows. Better to travel beyond the earth than to rot in the backwaters of the world. Shu knocks on the door, his eyes shining with determination despite his fear. Shiao entered the room. The number and name were called. The door closed behind him. Inside, there was bright light and cold silence. The doctor in the white coat looks sternly. The questions are standard. Risk, side effects, death. Everything is as usual. The answer is a firm yes. Xiao's gaze is calm, but inside his heart is constricted. He knows there is no way back. The last question sounds like a challenge. He is sure that you want to awaken a force from which there will be no return. He remembers hopes, ambitions, dreams. The chaos in his head gives way to determination. He is ready. The answer is a brief agreement. The room is filled with silence. The drug is administered. The request sounds mundane. Take off your pants. The femoral artery is the optimal injection site. Xiao freezes, then reluctantly obeys. The syringe approaches. The steel touches the skin. The needle penetrates accurately. The solution enters the blood. The countdown begins. The monitors record biorhythms. The heart beats evenly. All indicators are normal. There is emptiness in his body. He feels nothing. No heat, no pain, no pressure. 10 minutes pass. Everything is the same. No pain, no vibrations, no mutations. Xiao worries. Will he really not be able to wake up? 30 minutes pass. No reaction, no changes, no signs of awakening. The girl is confused. She has never seen anything like this. A complete zero. Xiao stands up. His face is calm, but inside, everything has collapsed. He thinks, it's all over. He won't achieve anything. And then everything changes. His head spins. He falls, screaming in pain as if his skull is splitting. He clutches his temples. The girl calls his name, but he doesn't hear. Veins pulsate in his head. Vital signs are outside the normal range. Pulse is 180. Temperature is 50. He writhes as if on fire. His body is burning from the inside. His insides seem to be compressed into one lump. There is only one thought in his head. Death. He is dying. This is the end. Silence. Xiao's body is motionless. His consciousness floats in the void. He does not feel weight, pain, fear. There is peace inside. It is as if he is floating in his own mind. Everything seems unreal. In the space in front of him is a statue, enormous. Himself in the lotus position, massive, divine. He hears a countdown. 1, 2, 15. Suddenly, a flash. An electric discharge hits him. Eyes open. He is in the room. A voice says, "Consciousness restored." He is confused. The hologram glows nearby. The girl watches his indicators. The result shocks everyone. 14 hidden genes are awakened at the same time. Shu smiles. Such a rarity. But the joy does not last long. All genes are erudition. His face loses its luster. Erudition, analysts, office departments, papers. He remembers the rumors. The erudites are not fighters. They are observers, researchers, scribes, cold inside. Did he really go through pain to sit in the archives? The girl fills out the form. Everything is according to protocol. Injection, status, result. He asks about abilities. The answer is discouraging. Genes are hidden. There may be no powers at all. Even if they exist, they will not appear immediately. Sometimes in days, months, years. Therefore, they are classified as a latent type. He nods. He understands. But hope is fading. The world of heroes is not for him again. The girl hands over a business card. Hidden Type Institute. Professor An, University of Genoevolution. Huaxia. If he wants to apply to their university or learn more about the hidden type, then let him contact her. He's surprised. Professor, a specialist in people like him. Maybe not all is lost. He looked at the girl. Young, confident. Could a professor really be that old? She seemed calm, but her eyes were wary. She clearly hadn't finished saying something. Xiao nodded, turned around, and reached for the door. A voice stopped him. Smooth, but with concern. He turned around. She was looking straight into his eyes. She spoke of danger, of a shadow organization. The name of the organization was mentioned. Dawn's Redemption. The professor warned him not to catch their eye. Xiao had already heard about this organization. This is a group of people who betrayed humanity and conspired with alien invaders. Because of them, over the last 100 years outside of Earth, people have suffered major losses. They haven't disappeared. They are now hunting for genetically gifted people for their experiments. 5 students with 10 hidden genes have already disappeared. Xiao paled. He had 14. 14. The thought crossed his mind. He was a target now. The professor's voice was worried. He nodded, thanked her, and went outside. He paused outside the door. The world seemed different. Every step was like a minefield. The professor's words thunder in his head. He walks away. The anxiety grows. This is no longer just a game of heroes. He is no longer just a student. He is prey. Xiao walked through the crowd, thinking about his abilities. It would be better to have some combat skill, he thought. 14 hidden genes. What do they mean? The points of light he saw unconsciously floated into his head, and what they meant. A headache was tormenting him. Maybe it was a side effect of the injection. He heard a familiar voice. It was Chenmo. Next to him stood Tantan, another classmate. Friends were happy to see Xiao alive and well. Questions about the awakened genes immediately began pouring in. Chernish has awakened 11 genes, but they are all concentrated in his stomach. He might get fatter, Tantan said with a smile. 7 of Chernish's 11 genes are related to the digestive system. Soon, Chernish will become the king of fatties. The process is awakening, gradual changes, complete evolution. Tanton encouraged Chernish by calling him a future trans-mutant glutton. Chenmo replied, "Let him not delude himself. He is a sack of fat. His 8 genes are focused on hand speed, and it is not yet known how useless he is." A fight began. Some argued about who was cooler, making fun of genes. The question of the number of genes was passed on to Shiao. She said proudly, "I have 14 hidden genes." The guys were amazed. The awakening of 10 or more genes is rare, and here there were 14. Shiao was called a true genius and a big brother, and asked not to forget them. But then Shiao finished speaking. He has a class of erudition. Friends were surprised. Erudites are considered difficult to develop. Finding a job right away is not easy, and the choice of universities is limited. Chenmo disagreed. He told about a relative who was an erudite person and had changed 7 jobs. He was now preparing to become an abbot. The thought of monasticism brought a smile to my face. Erudite people are not in great demand, mostly public relations jobs. Xiao noted that he could only enroll in Huaxia, but the hidden type is a mystery. No one knows Xiao's abilities. A university professor can help you figure this out. A classmate suggested having a snack together first. Thinking too much is bad for you. He knew a place with a buffet, ideal for relaxing. His head was hurting badly, so Xiao decided to skip the meeting with his friends. He promised to treat everyone next time and left. His friends looked after him with concern. Was everything okay with Xiao? They wondered. The news was heard on the street. The federal government had launched a new policy of public projects. 3 space railways are planned for secondary transportation hubs. In recent days, students with more than 10 hidden genes have disappeared. The organization Redemption of Dawn is suspected. Recently, the heroes encountered a drug trafficking case. Xiao was clutching his head again. His genes were making themselves known. His head was splitting again. A strange feeling appeared. It was his ability, he thought. His perception around him improved. He felt the location of objects in the cafe, the number of visitors. I felt what was happening in the kitchen, but I didn't see the small details. Attempts to improve perception failed. It seems that the current perception of things is already the limit. Decided to practice at home. But the feeling that someone was watching him did not leave Xiao. 3 people followed Xiao quietly, hiding in the shadows. They kept their distance, not trying to get closer. Xiao felt the tension. These were members of the Redemption of Dawn. The thought of calling the police flashed through his mind, but he quickly rejected it. The police would hardly believe a teenager that dangerous people were following him. Any mistake could cost his life. Xiao understood this well. He remembered the business card. He decided to contact Professor An first to seek help there. It was decided to spend the night at the police station to be on the safe side. Jingcheng City Hall. Commander Liu Tanhu demands a strict report on the students. Whoever disobeys orders, he will personally deal with them with all severity. The professor looks at the phone in surprise and interrupts his speech. The professor asks Principal Zhou for help for the student Xiao who is being persecuted. He will send people, or she will deal with it herself. Zhou, the director of the Secret Service, checks the data on the tablet and reassures the professor. He confirms that the stalkers discovered by the student are sent by their Secret Service. He will be safe with them. Professor An is perplexed. Why 3 employees for 1 erudite person? The director suggests that the 3rd stalker is possibly a member of the Dawn Redemption Organization. They only sent 2. The professor insists on eliminating the threat for safety reasons. The girl asked Principal Zhou who he would send to protect the student, or if she was ready to go herself. The director advises to leave everything as is. 2 agents are enough for security. The girl got angry when she learned that the enemies were not going to be eliminated. She asked if the schoolboy had become bait. The man from the admissions office explained that a student with 14 genes is ideal for catching enemies. The professor was indignant. How could one risk a student? Whose order was this? She wondered. The colonel stated that it was he who ordered the student to be used as bait. The goal is to capture the members of the Redemption of Dawn organization and reduce student losses. The professor was indignant. A student with awakened genes should not be used as bait. What if something goes wrong? The colonel explained that the risk was taken into account. Even his death was included in the plan. The man added that the sacrifice of one erudite would give an advantage in the fight. The professor left the meeting, but was stopped, threatened with a council trial if she took matters into her own hands, and the whole plan collapsed. The colonel ordered, "Let Shiao tell the erudite only part of the information, without revealing the plan." The professor agreed, but mentally promised to help Shiao another time. She would make every effort. She received a message. He was being guarded by two people, but the third could be an enemy. He realized that if the agents did not act, although he was in danger, then he was bait. He needed to save himself. Xiao noticed a cafe ahead with a bright sign. 7 flowers. Without thinking, he walked inside. The room smelled of fresh baked goods and sweet tea. There was a young girl standing behind the counter. She smiled and politely asked what he wanted. He glanced at the menu, his thoughts tense but his outward appearance calm. Having made his choice, he ordered a cup of the sweetest tea with sweet potato and milk. He asked for it to be made especially hot. The saleswoman raised her eyebrows in surprise, but did not argue. A few minutes later, she handed him a glass from which thick steam rose. He took it, thanked him, and headed for the exit. The street was noisy. People passed by without noticing him. He was holding not just a drink, but part of a carefully thought-out escape plan. There was a man standing at the entrance to the cafe. It seemed like he was nearby by chance, but his gaze was too focused. He was waiting. As Xiao walked out with a cup of tea in his hands, the man behind him chuckled faintly, and, without wasting any time, followed after him. Xiao felt a pressure, as if a shadow was looming behind him. Every step was an effort, not from fatigue, but from tension. He didn't turn around, but he knew for sure that they were following him. The boiling drink in his hand seemed like the only weapon available. Suddenly, he turned around sharply. In one swift movement, he threw the contents of the glass into the face of his pursuer. The boiling water burned his skin, and the man screamed, clutching his face contorted in rage. He uttered something incoherent, a curse, a question, a muffled threat. But then, as if casting aside his doubts, he rushed forward, intending to seize the fugitive. His gaze became cold. If he couldn't capture the target alive, he would destroy him. Xiao froze. At that moment, fear paralyzed him. His body refused to move. His mind frantically searched for a way out. The threat became real. The chase game was over. The fight for survival began. A strong blow to the stomach sent Xiao flying backwards. He fell, rolling on the asphalt, and struggled to get up on his elbows, struggling with the pain. Xiao had already noticed internally that the force of the blow was not normal. The attacker clearly had enhanced genes, and they were apparently concentrated in his legs. This was dangerous. Not just a bully, not just a stalker. This was an agent. One of those who belonged to the organization Redemption of Dawn. Xiao raised his hand sharply, pointing at the enemy, and loudly, so that everyone could hear, he declared, "Before them is a traitor, an enemy of humanity." The crowd immediately erupted. Screams of horror, attempts to escape, panicked, Redemption of Dawn, all mixed together in a street cacophony. People scattered, bumping into each other, leaving behind bags and phones. The agents, who had been watching covertly until then, were forced to reveal themselves. They rushed towards the attacker. 3 men now stood in the narrow space between the cafe window and the street. 2 from the Secret Service and 1 from Atonement. A fight ensued, a blow, a counterattack. The aggressor moved quickly and methodically, making no mistakes. Despite the professionalism of the agents, he was clearly not inferior to them in strength. He hit them in the face, in the neck, dodged, as if he knew in advance where the attack would come from. Shiao, still sitting on the ground, clutched his stomach and hissed in pain. He watched the fight, feeling increasingly helpless. The attacker was still glancing in his direction. The target had not changed. He was the main target. Anger, fear, and despair were all mixed together. He couldn't help it. His body wouldn't obey him. The blow he had received earlier seemed to have frozen his muscles. Why he was an erudite flashed through his mind. He wanted to be a fighter. He wanted to be useful. But now he was just a schoolboy lying on the ground. Closing his eyes, he felt something stir inside him again. Not pain, no. It was something else. Like some force, hidden deep in his genes, had come to life. Xiu suddenly found himself inside a strange vision. Everything was the same as the day he lost consciousness after the injection. His inner image appeared before him again, a giant reflection of himself, sitting in the lotus position. Above it are 14 shining points of light, connected by thin energy lines, like constellations in the night sky. He immediately understood. These were his awakened genes. Each dot was the result of a hidden mutation, each of which had yet to fully unfold, and below are hundreds of gray, dim dots, unawakened, potential that still sleeps. Xiao's consciousness seemed to penetrate into the very structure of his body. He saw how the energy transformed by the stomach moved through the vessels and tissues. This energy fed his gene points, saturating each of them with the necessary resources for activation. But the flow was weak, uneven. Too many barriers, too many blocks. He concentrated, trying to redirect the energy to one of the incomplete points. He felt a sharp pain, tension in the vessels, as if the internal pressure was ready to tear him apart from the inside. It was clear. Gene activation was a painful, dangerous process that required not just willpower, but also knowledge. But now there was no choice. And suddenly, a flash. One of the gray dots trembled and lit up with a soft light. The gene point activated. The energy went faster. Some of the pain subsided. Xiao felt something change in him with the activation. His perception became deeper, his attention sharper. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to awaken genes. It wasn't just statistics, it was transformation. Outside, the fighting continued. Blows thundered like hammers. The enemy fought the agents with the same ferocity. However, Xiao no longer felt helpless. He opened his eyes. A smile appeared on his lips. Strength was awakening within him. The criminal, having suppressed the agents, stood over them with a contemptuous grin. There was irritation in his voice. He was tired of useless resistance. He was confident of victory and stepped toward Xiao, extending his hand. However, Xiao was no longer the same. He looked at his attacker with a hardness in his eyes. The energy inside him bubbled, and his body filled with unexpected strength. Unexpectedly for everyone, Xiao struck, precise, powerful. The criminal flew back with a scream, crashing into the wall. The Secret Service agents stood up with difficulty and looked at Xiao in bewilderment. The agents rushed forward, twisting the immobilized criminal. At the same time, a closed meeting was continuing in the City Hall building. Professor An stared at the screen in silence. There was no message from Xiao. Her anxiety grew. Her thoughts were racing. Either he had done it, or he hadn't. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was a call from the outer sector, too important to ignore. The director of the Secret Service, irritated by the breach of protocol, reluctantly responded. The news was unexpected. Xiao was safe and sound. Moreover, he fought back against the attacker, allowing the agents to successfully arrest one of the members of the Dawn Redemption Organization. This information angered the colonel. Now the whole city knows that the traitors were going to kidnap a man. They will definitely stop any actions. The bait plan, carefully planned and kept secret, had been foiled. He couldn't understand how an ordinary schoolboy had uncovered the whole scheme. The investigation began. Someone had leaked information. The colonel looked suspiciously at Professor Anne. She, without lowering her gaze, calmly threw back at him. If necessary, you can check her devices. But deep down, she already knew. Shiao himself understood everything. The colonel continued to look at her with a cold, searching gaze, but the professor already knew. Shiao was no longer an ordinary student. He would have to be reckoned with. The colonel gave orders. The investigation was to begin immediately, and he wanted to see 20,000 word reports on his desk by the end of the day. Meanwhile, the identity of the detainee was established at the Qingqingcheng City Secret Service building. The stalker turned out to be a man named Ma Shuhu, known by the call sign Underpants. He had not appeared in the reports before. Those seen in similar operations were only of rank F. However, Shuhu is of rank E, which is why 2 agents could not handle him. Shuhu's current state and how quickly he was taken out. It's possible that the agents did most of the damage, and the student took him out. When the director approached the interrogation room, he saw Shiao greedily eating food. The officer explained that Shiao had started complaining of hunger, so they decided to give him a snack before the interrogation. Shiao thought. The forced awakening of the genetic point apparently made itself felt. Headaches, loss of strength, brutal appetite. Now he would be interrogated. It was inevitable. However, he was equally worried about his abilities not being fully revealed. She said he received a message from Professor N and suspected that one of the 3 pursuers might be dangerous. This is what prompted him to take action. The director listened attentively to the story. He knew that Professor An had essentially broken protocol by telling Shiao too much, but the young man had shown courage and initiative despite the risk. The director admitted, "This guy has potential." He apologized for the behavior of his agents, noting that they failed. Shu would be able to return home once he signed the confidentiality agreement. He would receive 6 points as a reward, and also 50,000 in cash. According to the code, catching an E-rank traitor is worth 10 points. He got the bulk of the credit. The director informed Shiao that 6 points would certainly not raise him to the level of E-rank, but it was still worthy of praise. Shiao, however, was not going to leave without clarification. He was worried about whether the Secret Service would use him as bait again. The director froze for a second, then slowly turned around and spoke more seriously. Every year, unique geniuses with a rare set of strong genes appear. Almost all of them became objects of hunting by the Dawn Redemption Organization. It was for this reason that the decision was made to secretly monitor such students by the Secret Service. Capturing an enemy agent is a rare occurrence, and such opportunities rarely arise. He reminded that Shiao had already awakened 16 genes, which automatically made him the object of constant protection. Those who awakened 15 genes or more were protected, but all of them, unlike Shiao, were not smart enough and were captured. The director, noticing that he had already said too much, quickly deviated from the conversation, citing urgent matters. Shiao contacted Professor An. He said that he had applied to enter the University of Gene Evolution, Faculty of Erudition, and would become her student. He also conveyed that the Secret Service intends to continue using him as bait to avoid the disappearance of other students. Shiao asked if all this was true. The professor replied that it was enough to look at the news of the annual examinations to see how serious the situation was. That guy simply underestimated Shiao, but under certain circumstances, Shiao is afraid to imagine what could happen. Shiao realized that there were great dangers ahead. If he wanted to control his own destiny, he had only one way: to become stronger, and as soon as possible. At this time, a message appeared on the computer screens in the Secret Service lobby labeled General Surveillance. It was reported that object number 37, that is, Shiao, began to exhibit unusual activity. They asked to formulate a plan for further monitoring. If there is no response for a long time, the task will be automatically transferred to Plan Number 1. Launching active actions. 3 days later, Xiao received an acceptance letter from Huaxia University, the top university in the association. His mother was absolutely delighted and immediately decided to take a photo of the letter to send to relatives. The father, watching what was happening, also noticed that his son had achieved great success. At the family dinner, everyone discussed this important moment. Xiu thought about how he had spent all his strength in these 3 days trying to awaken a new gene base point in his left leg. It took a huge amount of effort. His body could barely cope, and he even fainted while concentrating. And there were no results, zero effect. But my right hand seemed more sensitive. He realized that it was still difficult for him to become stronger, but he was confident. Entering university, acquiring advanced knowledge and practice will help him achieve his goal. The father, noticing his son's fatigue, gently reminded him to control himself and not to stoop to licentiousness. Do not overexert yourself and exercise at night, but not too often, so that the body does not become exhausted. She said he had misunderstood and denied his father's hints, but his father interrupted him, reminding him that he was now a university student. Mom and Dad had prepared a gift for him, energy capsules. His parents explained that the University of Gene and Evolution required a lot of resources, and these capsules would help him increase his powers when he was ready to use them. Energy capsules are an important gene supplement that helps strengthen the body. However, most ordinary people can only afford F-rank capsules, which cost around 100 yen each. E-rank capsules, which are more powerful and rare, cost as much as 5,000 yuan. This is very expensive, and not everyone can afford it. The father smiled and said that the price did not matter to him, because over the years of work, he had saved enough to provide his son with these supplements. The mother carefully warned her son to study hard and not to provoke the bandits from the redemption. These people will not be stopped by anything, and they kill without hesitation. She asked Xiao not to be a hero, but just take care of himself. Xiao nodded, understanding the importance of these words. Night fell. Xiao sat on the bed, deeply concentrated. Closing his eyes, he concentrated. He went into himself, trying to control the energy. His left leg was very swollen from excess energy, and he realized that if he concentrated all his force into one point, it could explode. Then he began to redistribute energy to other points, and they began to light up. He cried out in pain and leaned on his hands, but he was glad. He had managed to awaken 2 genetic points at once. However, the body was exhausted, and the pain did not subside. He realized that the E-rank capsule would help restore physical energy, but not mental strength. So he decided to train his consciousness. Xiao heard his parents' voices asking if he was awake. He jumped up in surprise, jumped up to the ceiling, hit his head, lost his footing, and fell. Standing up, he told his parents that everything was fine. At that moment, he was happy that the strength of his left leg had finally increased. At that moment, the parents entered the room, disturbed by the noise. They noticed that Xiao had already woken up and had changed a lot. His body had become more defined and strong, in contrast to his previous fragile figure. Xiao felt very hungry after working hard. Yesterday, Xiao managed to awaken gene points in 2 places at once, in his left leg and in his brain. He felt his strength increase, and he was surprised that the strength of his right palm had also increased significantly. This led him to the idea that the genes of some parts of the body could directly influence each other. To confirm his feelings, he took the card and tested it by throwing it into an empty jar. The movement of his fingers was confident and precise. Strength was important, but even more important was mastering the proper throwing technique, which he still lacked. Then he threw a deck of cards, taking into account that air can change the trajectory of light objects. The cards were large, but light. To test the penetrating power, Xiao took a plate of beans. They definitely could not change trajectory. Their weight was optimal. He dropped one soybean into the bottle and it passed right through, creating an impressive spectacle. He realized that if he used a metal ball and hit a person, the result could be fatal. Now, in case of new dangers, Xiao felt much more confident and ready to fight back. A lot of people gathered in the square near the huge stairs. The man on stage loudly encouraged everyone to strive to be the best and contribute to the association, promising a bright future. She said goodbye to his parents. They asked him to take good care of himself, and if he needed money, not to be shy and to contact them immediately. Xiao responded with mutual concern. The classmate assured him that everything was under control and promised to look after him so that he would not go hungry. He chewed on chicken legs, and soon a conversation began about another classmate, Tan, who was absent. She said that he had entered Zunwu University. Chenmo was surprised that he had not informed him personally. It turned out that Tang chose to hide this by asking Xiao to report it in his stead. Zunwu University offered many opportunities, but after graduation, it required mandatory military service and service in the frontline combat forces. This caused concern, because it is known that about 20% of fighters in such units die. But Tan is strong and fast, and there is no doubt about his combat capability. The announcement came loud and clear. All students were asked to take their seats. There were only 10 minutes left before departure. Xiao waved goodbye to his parents, who shouted back to him to let them know as soon as he got there. The students quickly took their seats. Xiao's classmate began to fantasize out loud that he would definitely start an affair with the university's most beautiful girl, citing the fact that he devoted all his school time to studying. Suddenly, one of the students sarcastically reminded him that his genes are in his stomach, and he is called a glutton who is afraid of buffets. Another picked up the joke, adding that such a man shouldn't even dream of the 10th beauty. Xiu responded to the ridicule in a restrained but sharp manner, suggesting that Ming be more restrained in his words. An argument ensued, with Ming offering to teach Xiao a lesson, but was interrupted by an intervening observer. He abruptly ended the argument, demanding that the quarrel be stopped immediately. Chenmo tried to restrain Xiao, advising him not to react. Xiao, however, expressed a warning. To keep his mouth shut in the future, it would be safer for Ming. The teacher warned that if they did something like that again, he would show them a happy future. At this point, the teacher accompanying the group introduced himself. His name was Cha Yifeng. He worked in the education department of Jincheng City. He reminded that the registration season is often hectic, and that maintaining discipline on the road is everyone's responsibility. He hoped that everyone would arrive in Kyoto safely, begin their training, and not cause any unnecessary trouble. If anyone tried to distinguish themselves, he would teach them a lesson. Chenwo's classmate whispered with a worried look. He should control himself. After all, sitting next to Ming was none other than Tongshi himself. A true fighting machine that awakened 16 genes during a single test. By the way, Director Zhou also mentioned him. Next to him sat another outstanding figure, Gong Ling, a girl who combined beauty and strength, a true ideal. Chenmo, barely noticing her, muttered with delight that he was beginning to like the university more and more. Xiao asked her not to make him blush because of him. Suddenly, a woman appeared. Attractive, self-confident, she immediately attracted the attention of the students. The students could not contain their delight. The woman introduced herself. Her name was Professor An, and she represented the Faculty of Erudition at Huaxia University of Evolutionary Genes. She was also assigned to accompany their group. In a restrained but clear voice, she reminded them of discipline and stated that she was ready to help with any questions. The students responded in unison, making it clear with military precision that they understood everything. Xiao noted to himself, Professor An had come with them, too. The vehicles set off, and soon the entire transport group was on its way. Inside the mobile command post, they reported, the column is moving on schedule, and generators of ultrafine radiation particles have been launched on each vehicle. In recent years, the policy of a single genetic test has seriously undermined the ability of criminal organizations to recruit new fighters. This is why the registration season has become a period of increased risk. Attacks at this time have become increasingly likely. The column consisted of about 100 vehicles, which made the enemy's task much more difficult. It was too difficult to find the right one among them. The third car contained Tong, Lin, Xiao, and Chernish, the students with the most awakened genes this year. Xiao noticed that the column was moving in the opposite direction from Kyoto, which made him suspicious. However, it quickly became clear that this was done intentionally. The route was chosen with the aim of confusing a potential enemy. Watching the wild nature, long untouched by man, rush past, the thought flashed. Someday, he will go to explore such places. Soon, the teacher's voice brought everyone out of their thoughts. It was announced that there were 30 minutes left until the first supply point. The stop there is only for 3 minutes. It is strictly forbidden to approach the walls. Violators will be regarded as a threat and shot without warning. As the convoy entered the base, the landscape outside the windows changed to a gloomy military infrastructure. Massive vertical takeoff aircraft flew overhead, and a heavy air of anxiety hung in the air. The base looked impressive, but at the same time, frightening. Chenmo, usually cheerful and talkative, said seriously for the first time, "It's scary here." Shu instinctively became wary. Everything around reminded me that danger might be closer than it seemed. The column was preparing to leave the base. The teacher called on everyone to return to the cars. Xiao noted with displeasure to himself that even basic needs were not so easy to satisfy on a military base. While the others were hurriedly leaving the toilet, he noticed something strange. There was a knocking sound in one of the stalls. This made him suspicious, and he used telepathy to check who was inside. It was Teacher Cha. Xiao felt that he was clearly doing something secretive. The teacher came out of the booth visibly tense. She shared his observations with the guards, mentioning that the teacher seemed to be trying to put something in his mouth. Strange behavior, especially in such a place. The guards reacted with laughter, thinking it was all a joke. One even asked why Xiao was peeping at all. Xiao tried to justify himself, but there was no time left. The car was leaving in 30 seconds. He had to run to the exit urgently. One of the guards jokingly advised him to watch fewer movies. As Xiao, out of breath, took his seat in the car, Teacher Cha coldly said that everyone was waiting only for him. He added that if he liked the base so much, he could have stayed there. Xiao, trying not to show suspicion, apologized and casually asked about the food at the base. The teacher became angry and did not develop the topic. But Xiao already had doubts inside. The teacher's behavior was too strange to just throw it out of his mind. The situation on the bus changed rapidly. Xiao apologized for being late and sat down in his seat. The column continued moving. Chenwo offered food, but Xiao refused. All his thoughts were on something else. Xiao thought about the teacher's 2 dentures. There was something wrong with them. He couldn't tell the soldiers if they were in cahoots. It was risky. But who should I tell, Xiao thought. And suddenly he remembered Professor An. Xiao approached the professor and asked to sit down. She asked what he wanted. Xiao was interested in details about the hidden type. All the students noticed him and envied him because he was sitting with the goddess. Xi showed the professor the message about the teacher's suspicious behavior, and she responded immediately. An stood up and demanded to be checked. Teacher Chao tried to maintain his composure, but he did not have time to explain anything. The professor's power lifted him into the air and threw him hard against the ceiling, after which he fell to the floor with a crash. Security reacted instantly, pointing their guns and ordering everyone to remain in place. But Anya ordered them to sit down. They did not dare to disobey the order. The teacher tried to shout, threatening consequences, but no one took his words seriously. At the professor's request, Xiao approached him and demanded to see the contents of his mouth. Under the pressure of the situation, Xiao took out two invisible prosthetics. The professor examined them by activating the hidden magic power. The material and design of the prostheses confirmed the suspicions. These turned out to be magnetized tantalum devices, rare generators of secondary ultra-low waves, capable of bypassing standard security systems and transmitting information through any suppression screens. Their presence indicated espionage activity. The suspicion was confirmed. The teacher was leaking information, probably to a criminal organization. The teacher suddenly laughed. He declared that it was too late to change anything. Everyone in the column was doomed. The column began moving along a pre-planned route. It was supposed to reach a plain where it would be much more difficult for the enemy to attack. One of the soldiers reported that vehicle number 3 suddenly deviated from its course. This caused shock among the command. The machine requested a direct connection with the colonel, and the professor inside relayed the message. The enemy agent was exposed, and the column's route was revealed. They were drawn into an ambush. The colonel immediately gave the order to send reinforcements to vehicle number 3 and urgently changed the entire route. The column continued to advance, but soon new threats appeared. Enemy flying objects were spotted in the sky. The colonel requested reinforcements and aircraft. Shells began approaching the column. An order was given to immediately perform an evasive maneuver. However, one of the shells reached its target and a powerful explosion was heard. The colonel realized that the enemy was using precision weapons. The damaged vehicles were ordered to hold their ground and wait for help. The professor declared a state of emergency. Students were ordered to dismantle the seats, under which there was hidden protective equipment. The attack confirmed that Huaxia University is not just an educational institution, but an important military structure. Everything that was happening was in sharp contrast to what was being broadcast in official sources. The ground shook from the explosions. The air was filled with a roar. Students with shields were leaving the transport. Smoke was in the air. The professor gave clear commands. The troops activated electromagnetic interference and launched guided mines. The enemies used pulse cannons. The attack did not stop. Aeroskates appeared above the column. A shootout broke out in the sky. However, it unexpectedly turned out that some of the students in the column were actually undercover fighters. They entered the battle in an organized manner, repelling the enemy's onslaught. Xiao watched the scene with inner tension. He realized that the enemy was strong, but the army was even better. A fierce firefight began. Explosions, smoke, shots, everything merged into one chaos, where every moment could be the last. Reinforcements were due to arrive in 3 minutes when the ground suddenly shook. The troops became alert, but it was too late. Giant spikes burst from the ground, piercing several soldiers through and through. People realized that this was an attack by a hidden type of carrier capable of manipulating the Earth. Everything pointed to a mutant whose gene structure had been seriously altered. Perhaps he had undergone a complete transformation. And he was one of the genetically enhanced combat agents known as B rank. Despite his strength, the professor noted that his attack range was limited. 2 men appeared from the edge of the forest. One of them, armed with a sword, moved quickly and confidently. The second one taunted the army, pointing out its uselessness. Any attempt to kill them would result in the death of the attackers themselves. The soldiers opened fire. The man with the sword easily blocked the bullets, taking out the attackers without hesitation. The ground opened up. Thorns burst forth right under the soldiers' feet, and the ranks of the defenders rapidly thinned. Cracks were spreading everywhere. The attack wasn't just aimed at destruction. They were targeting the car with the students. Among them were the rarest carriers of highly active genes. The colonel, without hesitation, rushed into the attack, despite the warning. With a scream, he lashed out with his energy spear and pierced one of the attackers. The next moment, there was a blinding flash, and the enemy's body disappeared, disintegrating into dust. The second attacker jumped back and said with disgust that his partner had turned out to be worthless. He prepared for the next step, realizing that he would now have to act alone. The commander of the traitors gave the order to delay the enemy and buy him time. The colonel deliberately drew enemy fire onto himself by creating a protective energy shield around his body. Despite the pressure, he continued to attack, landing powerful blows, trying to hold off his enemies. The gang leader, observing what was happening, ordered the commander to be set on fire in order to break his resistance. Chenmo noticed that this was a manifestation of a transcendental type of power, a rare and dangerous ability. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard, which alarmed Lin. The professor explained that the sound was coming from the forest. Mutants were heading there, another threat. The mutants have emerged from the forest, and now the path to salvation has become significantly narrower. The choice of exit became critical, and the battle became more difficult due to the appearance of new enemies. The soldiers desperately tried to hold back the onslaught, shouting for no one to let the monsters get any closer. Huge tigers, like wild animals, furiously attacked people, breaking through the defensive line. Fear and panic gripped the soldiers and students. Screams of horror filled the air, and help seemed increasingly out of reach. Shiao noted with alarm that the last line of defense was almost destroyed. The teacher's reminders of the possible consequences turned out to be prophetic, he shouted, pointing out that he was right. The teacher tried to intervene, but the professor stopped him abruptly and demonstrated her authority by kicking him. She assured the students that not only she, but also other teachers were at their disposal, and no one would be left without protection. She walked through the crowd of teachers and stood at the front lines. Now they were the last hope. The monsters rushed at the military, but suddenly one of the teachers appeared in the air, rushing into battle with a cry of challenge. Everyone was eagerly awaiting reinforcements, but they still did not arrive. The colonel once again reminded that the traitors were targeting the third vehicle, urging the soldiers to move there faster. However, command seemed pointless in the chaos and fear that reigned around. The professor stood in front of the approaching monsters, using her hidden type. She had 3 balls in her hands, which she threw into the air. A protective field instantly appeared around her. This surprised and inspired the students, including Xiao's classmate, who could not hide his admiration. One of the monsters grabbed one of the teachers by the throat, but the professor quickly pushed him away with her strength. She created an impenetrable barrier that stopped attacks, including bullets aimed at her. Despite the tension, she kept her cool, although she was forced to acknowledge the difficulty of the situation. Suddenly, a whirlwind appeared in the air, from which huge eagles flew out, approaching along with the monsters. The professor ordered the students to raise their shields to protect themselves from danger. The monsters continued to advance, and cries for help and despair filled the space. Xiao tried to organize the students and motivate them to take action. Lin found herself face to face with a huge wolf. Xiao threw a steel ball he had prepared in advance at the monster, which pierced the wolf's skull. This surprised the monster, but he immediately turned his attention to Xiao, preparing to strike back. He swore to destroy him. The monster rushed at Xiao, shouting, "Die!" But suddenly, Chen Mo stood in front of him, holding a shield. The monster smashed the shield into pieces with disdain, pushing the defender back, and laughed. Xiao quickly prepared a second steel ball and threw it, but the monster only received a light blow to the forehead. His head was too strong for a long-range attack. Xiao realized that he had to change tactics. The monster rushed to attack again, but green vines burst out from under the ground and entangled his arms. Lin, who was standing behind, encouraged and asked to hurry up. Xiao praised her for her quick help. The monster, bound by vines, continued to laugh and mock his attempts to hit it. Meanwhile, military personnel appeared in the rear. The monster screamed, ordering them to continue shooting at the professor, who steadfastly held up her protective shield and deflected the bullets. She launched a counterattack, and the soldiers covered themselves and did not give her a chance to hit. The monster indignantly declared that Xiao had ruined his plan and rushed into a new attack, but he did not give up, even though he acknowledged the enemy's speed. At that moment, the rest of the monsters appeared from the horizon, approaching the position. The professor took the central position, her eyes glowing with magical power, preparing for battle. Suddenly, planes appeared in the sky and began bombing. The long-awaited reinforcements had arrived. The colonel noted with relief the arrival of help, and the battle began to take a new turn. One of the advancing bandits furiously scolded his comrades for failing to eliminate the girl who was interfering with their plans. The colonel approached and gave the command to come forward and accept the fight. In response, the bandit ordered the implementation of the third plan: emergency evacuation. The warriors raised their heads, their eyes blazing with rage and determination. Suddenly, there was an explosion. The professor, who was nearby, closed her eyes and began to fall to the ground unconscious. Xiao managed to run up in time and pick her up in his arms, breathing a sigh of relief. The colonel realized in anger that the traitor's subordinates were ready to blow themselves up to save the bastard. He killed his own to escape. The military inquired about the direction of the enemy's retreat and prepared to pursue. But the colonel abruptly ordered a halt to concentrate on strengthening the defense and helping the wounded, as well as supporting the students. There was disappointment inside the colonel. He had hoped that the operation would go smoothly, but everything went wrong. There was a medical scanner on the ceiling, aimed at Chenmo. He woke up and started moaning. Xiao, who was sitting next to him, asked him not to move and just lie there. A classmate asked in surprise if they had escaped, to which Xiao explained that, on the contrary, the enemies had disappeared with the arrival of reinforcements. The classmate noted with relief that he was glad to survive and did not want to end his life without any special achievements, and he did not have a girlfriend. The doctor reported that the classmate's condition was satisfactory. Despite 3 broken ribs and a fractured radius, no internal organs were damaged, and at least 3 months of rest will be required. In a short time, 15 soldiers and 4 students were killed, and if it weren't for Teacher Anne, the consequences would have been much worse. Chenmo recalled how the snipers blocked the teacher, to which Xiao added that thanks to her strength, she was able to cope and neutralize the attacker. At that moment, Lin came through the door, saying that Teacher Anne had regained consciousness and was asking Xiao to come with her. Professor An was sitting on the bed when a girl came up to her and said that she had brought Xiao. The professor immediately asked if it was Xiao who held her when she fell. Xiao confirmed this, explaining that he simply happened to be there at the right moment. The professor then asked if he had removed the blood from her body. Xiao was embarrassed and denied it, adding that the blood was removed by Lin, who changed her clothes. The professor expressed a desire to speak with the commander and asked to accompany her. Xiao tried to help her up, but suddenly became embarrassed and removed his hands, and the girl offered to help instead. At this point, the tied-up and beaten traitor teacher demanded attention, but the military threatened and warned him. Later, the colonel asked Professor Anne how she was feeling, to which she replied that she felt better and was grateful for the care. The colonel then reported that torture and drugs had not helped to extract information from the traitor, and a check of his office and home had yielded nothing. In addition, neighbors reported that the traitor's family had disappeared several days ago, indicating a carefully planned escape. The professor asked what they were planning to do with him. The colonel replied that a higher authority would deal with it and bring him to court-martial. However, the enemies made a technological breakthrough. The magnetized tantalum transmitters built into the dentures were switched off. Turning into ordinary prostheses, the only evidence linking the traitor to espionage was no longer evidence. Xiao and Ling were puzzled. The teacher chuckled and said that he was being accused unfairly and that he would not admit to anything, threatening that Xiao would pay for everything. The professor asked the commander whether they were still observing the rules of wartime. The colonel confirmed that he had given permission given the situation. The professor said she expected a possible new attack and recommended conducting an intensive interrogation of the traitor, right there on the spot, to eliminate further danger. The colonel gave the order to start recording. The soldier confirmed the execution of the order. The situation was escalating, and, operating under martial law, command approved the immediate use of unconventional interrogation methods. The prisoner began to panic. His voice broke from fear. He tried to object, demanded legal procedures, but doom was already visible in his eyes. The pressure was mounting. He was ready to talk, ready to confess, just to avoid the fate that was coming. The professor knew that all traces had already been erased, that his accomplices were aware of the capture and had long ago secured themselves. He no longer had any value, either as a source of information or as a figure of exchange. Her power slowly activated, filling the room with an invisible tension. The teacher was losing control of his body. His breathing was ragged. His muscles were cramping with terror. The professor did not look away. Betrayal is the worst of crimes. The colonel pulled out his knife without hesitation. His face remained impassive. There was no anger or pity in it, only the determination learned from years of military service. The students watching this froze in surprise. He took responsibility for himself, knowing that such decisions and actions had long been a heavy burden on his shoulders. He gave the order to keep a record. The interrogation lasted 5 minutes. The prisoner, an enemy spy named Chai Fen, died of blood loss. Then the colonel turned to Xiao, his gaze filled with firm assessment and respect. He remembered how the young man was the first to suspect the pursuer, and how later, in the chaos of battle, it was he who helped to identify the spy. All this was not accidental. Xiao knew that everything he had done was a necessity, a duty, not a feat. He had simply done what everyone was supposed to do. Airplanes flew slowly across the night sky, their silhouettes barely visible in the moonlight. Lin, still under the impression of the recent interrogation, wondered why the spy was not shot immediately. Professor An explained that there are laws in the world, and often it is the villains who know how to use them better than good people. The professor understood why the commander had called her. Even though they were on the same side, she was a professor at Huaxia University. They were in different camps, after all. If her name appeared in an official report, it would be a signal to her superiors to lie low. Xiao began to understand that these were traps, vile manipulations. The student was also shocked. All this turned out to be part of the trick they had fallen into. The professor reminded that what happened was just a warm-up for more dangerous events. The real world is full of lies and hidden enemies. And in this world, only those who will work, develop, and learn to protect themselves will be able to survive. This was their first lesson after enrollment. This was the harsh reality they had just entered. With the first rays of the sun, the column continued moving. Escort aircraft patrolled the sky, protecting the column from possible attacks. Their presence inspired confidence. Now, a sudden raid like the day before was not expected. The student watched the sky and thought, if the Air Force had been with them from the very beginning, the enemies most likely would not have dared to attack. Chenmo was lying on the floor. He remembered the mutant who controlled the Earth. This creature was so powerful that it single-handedly destroyed the entire convoy. According to Professor An, the mutant was one of the gradually changed Category B. The enemies deliberately used the carrier of earthly genes, Lin, who possesses a hidden type of gene power that can control plants. Yesterday's success was not only the result of her efforts, but also luck. If there had been no vegetation in the area of the battle, It would hardly have been able to detain the mutant. The situation could have turned out completely differently. The professor replied that now they could know the truth. She was one of the gradually changed, holding the rank of C. This statement astonished the students. It became clear that the professors of Huaxia Genome University may not be just theorists, but C-class fighters. The transcendent type requires a complete transformation, while the hidden type has more modest requirements, usually B rank. But for those with unique abilities, an exception may be made. Kaylee realized that the teacher was endowed with something unusual. Anya warned them that no matter what powers they had in the future, revealing them to others would mean exposing their own vulnerability. This is a rule dictated by the harsh reality where any careless word can cost lives. Otherwise, they will pay for this mistake in blood. Therefore, the most important thing is to be silent and survive. Xiao nodded, and Ling, a little embarrassed, realized that her question was inappropriate. Xiao shared his concerns. After enrollment, each student is required to provide genetic data. This could be dangerous. The professor explained that this data has a high level of confidentiality, and access to it is possible only with the appropriate permission. But Xiao still couldn't shake the feeling that official didn't always mean safe. The column was approaching its destination. The students perked up and rushed to the windows to see the view. They finally arrived in Kyoto, the famous scientific center and fortress city. Everyone's eyes lit up. Glittering towers, hovering platforms, a multitude of flying machines. Excited cries filled the cabin. A student noticed a flying skateboard, the latest model, costing almost $1 million. His father refused to buy him such luxury. Another muttered, "Rich kids." The guy, with obvious contempt, called everyone else a bunch of ignorant sheep who had never seen real life. Amidst the general noise, student Lin silently looked out the window. Her voice, barely audible against the background of the general hubbub, sounded calm. The city was beautiful. Chenmo started a casual conversation with Xiao, and he grinned as he noticed that Ling hadn't left Xiao's side for a moment yesterday. In a drawn-out, playful tone, he suggested that perhaps she was showing interest in him. Xiao immediately blushed. He tried to brush off the idea, but he looked clearly embarrassed. At that moment, Lin turned to them and asked what they were chatting about so cheerfully. Xiao fell silent, and Chenmo replied, "Nothing important." On the campus of Huaxia University of Gene Evolution, an image of a female instructor appeared on the screens. Everyone was required to take their belongings, leave the transport, and head to the check-in desk in accordance with pre-arranged pairs. It was also announced that an entrance test was scheduled for the morning, and students were advised to get enough sleep and be in good shape. Chenmo looked dejected. The thought of tomorrow's test clearly worried him. He wasn't sure he would pass it in his current state. At this time, a university representative approached them. She informed them that, given the circumstances, he was temporarily exempted from all events. Moreover, the university will take over his treatment for the next 2 weeks. Hearing this, he was clearly encouraged, and he happily lay down on the stretcher, declaring that he would not mind starting everything with lunch. Xiao, watching him, could not help but feel ironic. Lin came up to him and asked what was wrong. Xiao explained that his classmate was probably just happy at the prospect of free food and peace. They both laughed as they watched the patient enthusiastically go towards the care and attention of the medical staff. Xiao entered his room, feeling the fatigue and stress of the past few days weighing on him. The thoughts in his head were not calming down. Too much had happened in a short period of time. He understood. It was time to focus on the main thing. Training can no longer be postponed. Everything that has happened so far has only emphasized that he survived solely due to luck. Even though his parents assured him not to worry about money, Xiao knew that progress would require considerable investment. Tomorrow's entrance test is an opportunity. If he can get an S grade, he will be given a generous reward. 20 F-rank energy capsules, 4 E-rank capsules, and 2 high-enzyme protein supplements. This kind of reward could advance his development. Even after mastering the independent discovery of gene points, each gene point requires the use of 1 F-rank supplement, and 1 capsule cost 50,000. Now he had 2 main problems: lack of money and supplements. He knew that tomorrow he would have to give it his all. To get a C rank, he needed to activate at least 20 gene points, and now he was too short. If he manages to break through today, it will cover almost a third of his entire tuition costs for the year. In addition, his left hand was now also capable of throwing soybeans, a sign of progress. Shiao relaxed, took off his clothes and lay down on the floor, feeling fatigue grip his body. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was already morning. Yesterday's concentration had taken so much strength that he hadn't noticed how he had fallen asleep right on the floor. He opened the door and saw Professor An. She ordered him to close the door, and Shiao, slightly surprised, began to get dressed. The professor walked over to the table and placed a piece of paper with writing on it, urging Shiao to concentrate and read. The sheet read, 0.95 kilograms of passion fruit, food price. The professor deemed this sufficient, and then demanded that Shiao put on his pants. He thought that the professor herself had unceremoniously entered his room and was now giving orders like a commander. An observer looked into the room and called for the freshman to wake up with a smile. It was the senior student, Shiao. He promised to take care of them. But he suddenly fell silent, noticing the professor and Shiao, who was just putting on his pants, in the room. He became embarrassed, quickly turned around and pretended that he had not seen anything, promising to return later. Shiao smiled awkwardly. Professor An noticed that his condition had improved significantly. When asked about the awakened basic gene points, he replied that he had already awakened 20 and hoped to receive a C-rank evaluation. The professor promised that if Shiao performed well, she would be able to achieve this rank. But she warned him that when the time came for testing, he should not reveal his full strength. Shiao wondered why he couldn't show off his talent. The professor explained that his current level was best used for telepathy for surveillance purposes. This is an ideal skill to have in the midst of the intrigue and hidden conflicts that occur in organizations and even at university. She warned Shiao not to reveal his full strength, especially considering he was a student in the hidden type department, and now he is officially listed under her leadership. Shiao agreed, although he felt a little taken aback. When the professor handed him the form to sign, he was surprised and asked why it was necessary. He was told that as a key participant, he had to confirm the situation report so that it could be sent on. Shiao saw a message on the screen that he had neutralized the enemy during the attack. He tried to deflect responsibility. Shiao recalled that Professor An had killed the tiger, but she explained that she couldn't have done it without his help, so the credit was shared. Besides, the association promised a good reward, and Shiao really needed the money, so he thanked her. Shiao knew in his heart that helping and fighting were two different things, but the professor really put him first. After that, the professor said that Shiao should go take the test together with the senior student Jai, who was standing at the door and eavesdropping. When the professor left the room, the student tried to act casual, whistling. He approached Shiao, praised him, and asked how he spent the night with the Ice Queen, meaning the professor. Shiao was embarrassed and tried to explain that he had misunderstood. They had simply had some problems on the way, and he had signed some document. The senior student loudly claimed that there was no one else in the room except the professor and Shiao, and teased Shiao, hinting at their night together. Shiao tried to justify himself by saying that his friend was currently in the hospital. The student exclaimed that he was an alpha male who sent his friend to the hospital for the sake of a date. She realized that the boy had an overactive imagination and decided to keep him from running wild so that rumors would not spread. He proposed a bet, An older student would throw metal balls at him, and if Xiao dodged them, he would reveal the secret. If not, Xiao would forever remain silent about what had happened. The student gladly accepted the challenge. Throwing balls like a slingshot was interesting. He praised Xiao's courage, who immediately challenged him to a duel on the very first day. Xiao prepared for the test. The elder reminded that he had an S-rank extreme type, and the two available abilities were speed and super reaction. They stood opposite each other, and the elder warned about his reaction speed of 0.01 seconds, asking if Xiao was confident in the challenge. The duel has begun. She kicked the ball, which flew over the student's head, but he managed to dodge it. However, the second ball hit him right in the cheek, causing pain and a scream. Xiao declared his defeat, but the student was indignant. They had agreed that only one ball would be thrown, and that throwing with the left hand was prohibited. Xiao calmly replied that there were no such restrictions, and pointed to the ball lying on the floor, which was broken in half. So, he said, there was only one ball, and he used a trick. The student, angry, admitted defeat. The student agreed with Xiao's words. An argument is an argument, and a word is not a sparrow. He promised not to mention the incident anymore, which made Xiao happy. He felt that yesterday's training had gone well. Now his left hand was almost as good as his right. However, the older student noticed that the door was broken. A ball had hit it. Xiao was surprised. Test Delivery Center. The senior student suggested that he go in first, and he would check his teeth, then take Xiao to the next test. Xiao agreed. There was no queue at the test center, since erudition was not of particular interest. The girl reported that according to the blood test results, Xiao had awakened 20 basic gene points, which allows him to qualify for a low C rank. However, without a clear direction of ability, the rating will be reduced to a high D rank. Xiao has telepathy, having undergone additional testing on a special apparatus. If the abilities are shown well, he will be given an average C rank. Xiao thought about the specifics of the tests. Erudition really seemed arbitrary. He carefully studied the list of tests. He wondered how to get a high score in telepathy without attracting too much attention. As he approached the door, he saw a man who was being assessed. He saw not the farthest object behind the screen. The judge noted that he had awakened 13 gene points, which corresponded to a high base level of E rank. The ability to telepathy was considered good, and if there were no other abilities, the assessment could be average, D rank. Xiao was thinking about how to raise his grade by 2 notches to reach the middle C rank. He was interested in the maximum radius of telepathic perception that the judge noted, 2.26 meters with normal clarity over 2 centimeters. He decided to control his distance to get a good, but not too noticeable mark. The judge's gaze seemed wary to Xiao, and he suspected that he had caught on to his hidden plan. This added to his anxiety, but Xiao decided to proceed with caution. Xiao complained of dry eyes, trying to remain calm. His sharp gaze was dangerous for him. He hoped that the judge would not notice his nervousness. He repeated to himself that he could not make any mistakes, and that he had to complete the test first. The judge announced the beginning of the erudition test and asked Xiao to focus on the box and describe the object he felt. Xiao closed his eyes and concentrated. He soon noticed that the maximum distance at which he could telepathically perceive objects had increased. Up to 3.24 meters, 12 centimeters more than before. He realized that within a few days his ability had increased significantly. By showing all his strength, he could easily get the highest score. But he decided not to attract attention to himself. Life is already full of dangers, and he wanted to survive. The judge filled out a form noting that Xiao was able to distinguish between bread, raw meat, coffee beans in a cup, and a half-eaten hamburger at a distance of about 1 meter 63 centimeters. He was recorded to have awakened 20 gene points, and his base rank was assessed as low C rank, while his telepathic abilities were considered normal. Now all that was left was to wait for confirmation from the teacher in the erudition class. The judge asked Xiao to give him a minute of attention. Xiao felt a little wary when Associate Professor Choi Chingshan suggested that he transfer to the Institute of the Hidden Faculty of Mental Telepathy. Doubts arose in his mind. Why would he need this if he had already said that his telepathy was normal? Xiao thanked Teacher Tsoi and said that he had already chosen the faculty of erudition. Tsoi said that he had a special offer. For gifted students, there is a recruitment quota, which allows them to advance in rank and receive a reward within a year. Hearing this, the senior student asked in surprise if he was dreaming. Since such quotas were in the hands of senior professors, why did they want to give it to Xiao? Xiao himself was a little confused, but he understood that the rank increase would greatly reduce the burden on the family, and it will help in the future, especially considering my father's overtime work. He also mused that even though he had telepathy, he planned to open other gene points. And since he has a hidden type like Professor An, his powers are better suited to this direction. Xiao thanked him for the offer, but was in no hurry to make a decision. The older student urged him to agree. Tsoi explained that the teacher must first sign the transfer agreement. The elder was confident that Professor An would do it. Choi was surprised. The senior student confirmed that Teacher An had chosen Xiao before leaving. Choi politely reminded Xiao that the decision to transfer must be voluntary and asked him to let him know as soon as he was ready. Xiao agreed, promising to think about it. However, he felt the professor suddenly tense up, which made him suspicious. The conversation turned to grades and the possibility of rank advancement, with Xiao wondering if his bean-throwing ability would affect his final grade. After all, she may belong to the transcendental type, which is higher than the hidden one. The elder reacted irritably to this, sensing a hint of rivalry. He advised not to get hung up on the type. The main thing is to pass the test. Xiao asked where his combat abilities were being tested, and the senior student pointed to the palm strength testing area. At that moment, a voice was heard in the queue calling the next participant. Xiao, hearing his last name, responded and raised his hand. He noticed multiple notifications on his device, including a confirmation message, but decided to postpone checking until the test was completed. The line moved slowly, and Xiao had been standing in it for almost an hour. Suddenly, a student started pushing everyone aside. He rudely shouted his powers as a middle E rank and forcefully pushed forward, scattering the others. Xiao was surprised by what was happening and began to observe the situation. The students quickly became quiet. As soon as they heard that the guy had an average E rank, everyone understood. It was better not to get involved. In their world, rank meant not only power, but also social privileges enshrined in law. He referred to the convention, which stipulates that all public facilities are accessible first to those with high levels of authority. People below E rank were not even allowed into certain areas such as luxury hotels or private clubs. Obstruction by a low-ranking civilian was considered a misdemeanor, punishable by arrest and trial. E rank could only be achieved through significant advancement, such as advanced training, demonstration of ability, or outstanding achievement. Therefore, they were perceived as the chosen ones, either the lucky ones or those who had made it through at the cost of great effort. The rest were only at the start of the journey. At the university, status determined everything. An E rank was considered a demigod. An average E rank was either exceptionally gifted or came from an influential family. Either this guy is very strong, or he inherited 50 merit points and received the family's privileges. Now, this guy was approaching him. His intention to use privileges to skip the line could still be tolerated, but rudeness, that was too much. He tried to politely resolve the situation. He reminded him that he had already confirmed his place in line and suggested that the guy wait. But he only got angry. His voice became aggressive, sharp. He interrupted Xiao without even listening to the end, and, looking into his eyes fiercely, threatened. This was already a threat, not covered by any norms or rules, only by power and status. Xiao felt a cold rage rising in his chest. He had been taught not to flaunt his strength, but sometimes to remain human, you had to show your teeth. The crowd roared, stunned by what was happening. Just a minute ago, a normal argument at the queue turned into a banal display of force on the part of the impudent holder of the middle E rank. And now this same guy was lying on his knees, writhing in pain. And his three friends rushed to help their leader. They lay motionless, knocked down by precise shots from the pellets. All of them, one by one, were laid down by Xiao. Xiao silently straightened up. His gaze was cold, calm, but there was strength in that calm. Not a drop of panic. Not an ounce of fuss. He moved without unnecessary gestures, clearly and sharply, as if calculating the actions of each opponent in advance. The students around him were speechless. They knew very well who Yuani Shun and his friends were. The elite among the first-year students of the Distribution Institute. They were usually held up as examples and taken into account. Even teachers paid attention to their successes. The students were amazed. Some were already filming, some were posting photos, some were writing posts. Xiao had suddenly become a symbol of resistance. The university chat was filled with messages like, "Soy babes rule," "A freshman with balls is stronger than an E rank," "The bully fucker we've been waiting for." His photos began to be saved, and footage of the attack spread across forums. He became a hero. The defeated student continued to shout threats. He was angry not at the defeat, but at the fact that the crowd was no longer afraid of him. The usual hierarchy had failed. The E-rank powers that had previously ensured impunity now seemed useless in the face of real power. The senior student understood that he had acted fairly. He had defended himself. And yet, rules are rules, and the powers of an E-rank are a sacred thing. Xiao remained calm, but the tension inside him was growing. He knew he hadn't gone too far. The camera recorded everything. How they tried to hit him, how he defended himself. Not a single unnecessary attack. Only the reflection of the attack. But in the eyes of the system, the fact remained a fact. Students with higher authority were beaten, and he remained unharmed. The senior student tried to explain how serious the situation was. He spoke about international conventions, about the structure of university legislation. Even if he is right, the fact of using force can be interpreted as aggression. And for this, compensation at most, a reprimand at least. In the worst-case scenario, expulsion, especially if senior teachers or the administrative council speak out against it. But Xiao had no choice. He wasn't going to be a shadow. He already had to hide his strength. To give in now would be to signal that he was willing to be inferior. He knew he had to fight. Xiao stared at the screen silently, his fingers still on the confirmation bar. In a second, his status changed. The informational notifications came one after another, like gunshots, each one exploding his understanding of what was happening. He got his reward, and more than one. Winigo hadn't had time to read everything, but now he wouldn't delay. "Confirm," he pressed. "Hello, Citizen Xiao. You have neutralized the S-rank gene possessor. You will receive 60 servant points and a reward of 50,000 yuan. You have identified a high-ranking spy. You have been awarded the Lanxin Order for Intelligence and Bravery. In addition, you have received 1,000 points and a reward of 500,000 yuan. Your account has received 60 points from the Huaixia Gene Committee members. Your personal merit amount has reached the standard. Your personal authority increases have been upgraded to low E-rank authority. Your personal merits have reached the promotion standard. Your personal authority has been upgraded to the middle E-rank authority. Your account has received 1,000 points from the Huaxia Gene Committee members. Your personal merit amount has reached the promotion standard. Your personal authority has been upgraded to high E rank authority. Your personal merit count has reached the promotion standard. Your personal authority has been upgraded to a low D rank authority. Your personal account received a reward of 50,000 and 500,000 yuan from the financial fund account. Shiao smiled as he read the message. The elder was confused as to what was happening to him. It seemed as if he had lost his mind as soon as he learned about the possible expulsion. He decided to support Shiao and not let the great man fall. The elder suggested taking Yuan to the infirmary and not attaching much importance to the incident. He insisted that they shouldn't make a big deal out of nothing, since they were all studying together, and he didn't want to ruin anyone's future. Yuan demanded that Shiao apologize to the 4 victims and pay damages of 10,000 yuan each. For him, words meant nothing without actions. Shiao walked up and thanked the elder, but said that he would handle the problems himself, surprised that a man he barely knew was willing to stand up for him. At this moment, the discipline department appeared. Shiao called Yuan to tell everything. Shiao did not want to be blamed for not giving him a chance. Yuan found him fearless and warned him of the possible consequences. Shiao, he said, chose this path himself and should not regret the consequences. The elder was surprised at how fearless Shiao had become and was not afraid of the consequences. The teacher reminded them that the university rules exist to maintain discipline. Since they had not yet passed all the entrance tests, and they have already broken the rules, they need to be punished as a warning to others. All participants in the incident should be sent to the department for questioning. Obtain the recordings from the surveillance cameras and reconstruct the events. It was necessary to gather 20 witnesses, teachers or students. Yuan, with the authority of middle Yi rank, declared his intention to press charges, explaining that he had simply asked to clear the way, but Shiao refused and beat him up. Yuan, having the relevant powers, had a relative advantage under the regulations and did not require further questioning. He should have just told his side of the story. Yuan laughed and said that Xiao's remaining courage had disappeared. Shiao confidently replied that he did not consider himself guilty and was confident in his words. Shiao suddenly reminded the teacher that he had low D-rank powers, showing off his rank and pointing out his advantages. Yuan and his teacher were shocked and laughed, finding it incredible. He advised Shiao to learn to lie better, since even many teachers at the university did not have such authority. The teacher couldn't believe that a first-year student could inherit such a high rank, since he himself had worked hard for many years and was only able to reach the high E rank. And for a low D rank, hundreds of points were required. Deciding to check the information, the teacher confirmed his words, that according to the regulations, Shiao does have relatively preferential rights, and asked him to write a report on today's incident. Sign it and send it to the discipline department, and keep the lines of communication open for possible contacts. Yuan was surprised and confused, not believing what was happening. Van Routhier, deputy director of the discipline department, then reminded the students to follow the rules. Study hard and get up every day. Otherwise, the discipline department will come for violators in any weather. After that, he took the students and left. The senior student typed a post on his mobile, describing what had happened as something incredible. He wrote about an unwavering defender of justice who single-handedly dealt with 4 offenders, and he applauded him. Shiao asked what he was writing. The elder apologized. He didn't know that Shiao had inherited the rights, expressing respect for his father and asking to take him with him to the grave. Shiao quickly corrected that his father was alive and not dead. After that, the girl suggested starting the assessment again, to which Shiao apologized. The teachers were amazed by Xiao's display of strength. They took care of him, encouraged him, and helped him during the retesting, as they accepted him as a descendant of the hero. Xiao's card listed a grade of starting rank S-intermediate. At the University of Genoa Evolution Huaxi, in the reporting section, they even turned a blind eye to the fact that I was late for taking the test. He walked up to the cashier at the registration and payment office, room 003. The girl informed him that Xiao had received an average S-rank assessment. The annual tuition cost 16,000 yuan, and the teaching materials cost 1,000 yuan. However, due to his low D-rank authority, he was entitled to a 5% discount, bringing the total amount to 16,200 yuan. Voices could be heard from behind him calling him a soy superman and discussing how he had beaten Yuan, which was the law of nature. He was stronger. He was considered a descendant of a hero. Xiao was angry, thinking about how many times he had already explained that he was not a descendant of a hero, and why no one believed him. Someone awakened 25 gene points, and now Soybean Superman. Ching, who opened 24 gene points and had an F-rank rating. Despite this, everything went well, and the admission procedure was successful, which was confirmed by the girl. Xiao reacted with relief. Hong looked at the screen thoughtfully. A message came from Teacher Anne with a request. After the appointment is over, come to the Research Institute of Genetics number 14 and call to be let in. Xiu stepped aside and thought about how he should thank Anne for providing him with a special quota for recruiting students. It seemed as if the girl behind the cash register was exhausting her inner aggression. In the center of the room, many screens were glowing. A message appeared on one of them. That observation object number 37 is showing unusual changes and meets the criteria for further observation. It was ordered to formulate action plan number. First, number 26 confirmed his agreement to carry out the task and immediately began to carry it out. Xiao approached the building where he was met by a military man, and after checking, he pressed the access button. The professor greeted him, explaining that the Genetics Research Institute was actually separated from their institute by only one wall. She promised that next time he would get a permanent pass, which would make access easier. Xiao thanked her politely and sat down as she invited. The professor announced that she had 3 reasons for the meeting. She was going to sign his transfer to the Insight class while there was still time. He listened carefully, trying to concentrate, but he couldn't help but notice her attractiveness. She ignored his comment and continued. It was hard for him to contain his emotions. First, the Qinchen City Hall Defense Command sent a letter of apology, which she was supposed to deliver to Xiao personally. He thought the apology would be more appropriate if it were addressed to the victims, and not just to him. Secondly, from this day on, he becomes an intern at Research Institute number 14. His assignment involves carrying out various tasks. This meant that his responsibilities would increase. As a bonus, he would be given an E-rank energy capsule every month. Xiao didn't object. On the contrary, he was ready to start as soon as possible. He was more concerned with the opportunity to use his abilities and take the first real step in a new life. The professor moved on to the third point, which concerned the training and choice of Xiao himself. She considered the most important quality for students of the Hidden Institute to be not just intelligence, but mental strength. All abilities, including genetic ones, were based on it. It was an integral part of any awakening. To demonstrate, she took out metal balls. They began to move around the room, zigzagging up to the ceiling. Despite the complex trajectory, the balls did not touch any objects. Everything that was happening was under complete control. The professor explained that sufficiently developed mental power could be compared with unique abilities of an exceptional type. However, it was extremely difficult to develop. In the absence of precise methods, one had to rely on primitive exercises, meditations, and basic stimulants. She had her own secret method, the first condition of which was a thorough study of all the basics. This method was called inner vision. It allowed you to look inside yourself. The essence was the ability to sense each genetic point and then learn to control them. Xiao walked thoughtfully down the street, digesting what he had heard. It turned out that Teacher Anne already knew about his ability to use inner vision. He tried so hard to hide it, while for her it was all so obvious. It seemed almost mocking. He recalled her words. In principle, anyone can have vision, but only a few actually possessed this ability. Xiao understood that he was in a special state of heightened sensitivity to basic gene points. This opened up a path for him that was much more effective, both in awakening new abilities and in developing them further. For example, to unlock the chain of genetic insight abilities, it is necessary to awaken 8 interconnected gene points. Students use unique training methods. As a result, they awaken 15 points to achieve a level of penetrating vision with 50% accuracy. 7 additional gene points can give both useful abilities and useless and dangerous ones. Xiao was surprised. Does everything really depend on luck? In the first 30 years, awakening was indeed considered a game of chance. However, in the last 100 years, a huge amount of empirical data has accumulated. Thanks to this, there are now proven, relatively safe and effective methods of awakening. Their type has a higher chance of discovering new genes. The probability of successful awakening is at least 70%, and in some cases reaches 90%. By forming chains of genetic abilities, you can get developments, but the forces are limited. It is necessary to activate as few useless points as possible. Inner vision is not just the ability to observe. You can notice the smallest changes in your body, even instability or side effects. Secondly, with sufficient concentration and experience, one can use inner vision to forcefully awaken certain genes. The professor explained that inner vision has several functions, but other than activating new genes, it does not provide any special capabilities. Xiu thought that his inner vision seemed to be different from others. Teacher Anne gave him data with training methods, which he could view at any time, but had no intention of showing to anyone. At that moment, the elder appeared in front of him. He turned to Xiao, explaining that he was looking for him and apologizing for disturbing him. The elder one noted that their rooms were much better than those of the younger ones. Xiu suggested that if there were any problems, they should tell him directly. He then admitted that the Yuan family had contacted his family and asked them to convey a message that it was desirable to reduce big problems to small ones, and the small ones to 0. They had already discussed this with his father, and he could not refuse them. Xiao asked if the Yuan family had any connections, to which he received an affirmative answer. A senior student said the Yuan family has authority in Kyoto government circles, but their influence does not extend to the university. Despite this, they had the audacity to directly address the elder's father. Xiao was surprised and asked if this meant there was enmity between the elder family and Yuan. He explained that it was not exactly enmity. The Yuan family had enemies all over the world, and they should be careful, because if given the opportunity, they will not miss the chance to cause trouble. Xiao asked with a grin what would happen if he decided to respond harshly. The senior student explained that in the worst-case scenario, opponents could be expelled. But it is highly likely that the discipline department will simply place them under surveillance, given the current circumstances. Xiao guessed that perhaps this was why the elder was sent here. The senior student advised not to get involved in the conflict because it would only lead to new enemies. And while Xiao was strong, it was better not to create problems for himself. He then reported that the Yuan family had given Xiao 400,000 sincerities and the conditions that Yuan Shu had proposed. Xiao was surprised that he only had to change his report to say that it was a small fight and not a violation of authority. He agreed to make concessions, smiling. The elder confirmed that Yuan would not mind if the money was spent by Xiao on himself. After this, the older student apologized for disturbing him and left. Xiao laughed, thinking that 1 yuan was worth 400,000, and if he had many classmates like that, he would quickly become rich. But power requires money, he reminded himself. Then he remembered Teacher Anne's words about the password 4 zeros. And I found the necessary methods of spiritual concentration. Version 4.9, prepared by editors and published by the University of Genetic Evolution. Before starting specific training, it is important to understand what genes you will be working with and what abilities you will be using. If the number of awakened gene base points reaches around 20, it is considered a low-ranking manifestation. When 30 points are exceeded, we are talking about high-ranking manifestations, which already gives noticeable combat effectiveness. Version 4.9. The method has been reworked many times, divided into 3 parts. The third level is necessary, with activation of 12 gene points upon its completion. Shiao compared his abilities to Anne, thinking that his ability to throw balls from a distance was no stronger than modern thermal energy weapons. He imagined how he could fly in the air like her, and then everyone would consider him handsome. But he quickly drove these thoughts away and prepared himself for training. While preparing, he heard a voice signal and thought irritably about who was distracting him at such an important moment. It was a message from student Lin, who said that she had already moved into the dorm. She gave him the address of the room and invited him to come in, adding that her neighbor was very beautiful. Xiao wondered how beautiful his neighbor might be, but quickly dismissed the thoughts, deciding to focus on training. At this time, Yuan, having talked on the phone, informed his friends that the expulsion problem had been resolved. The maximum would be a serious warning, no supervision. His friends asked them to just forget about it. Yuan admitted that his family believes this is the end of the story, and that if he wants to succeed, he must rely only on himself. Xiao is from the hidden faculty of Erudition Institute, and they are from the beyond, so they will have little chance of meeting him again and taking revenge. One of Yuan's brothers proposed a plan, but Yuan immediately rejected it, saying that the family would not approve of such actions. They decided not to do anything directly or provoke Xiao, but to limit themselves to minimal actions. He explained that with the help of the internet, everyone could be made to hate Xiao, and he would always walk with his head down. On the second day, in the morning, Xiao was walking with a bag of groceries, thinking, that Yuan Shu was a really good guy, and without his generosity he would hardly have been able to buy so much. Remembering the news, he opened the dialogue box and read that a new generation of fierce fighters single-handedly defeated 3 Beyonders, and the enraged freshman stopped the outrageous ones with 1 soybean. This surprised Xiao so much that he even spat out the food he was chewing. There were many negative comments under this post, and he realized that someone had deliberately set up the situation to provoke a conflict between him and the Transcendental Institution. This made him angry, and he decided that the only way out was to train hard, so that no one could intimidate him. Besides, he had the opening ceremony ahead of him, which he was also thinking about. A large crowd of people gathered in the square. The teacher stood on the stage and addressed the students, reminding them that each of them had entered the University of Genoevolution, Huaxia, and that they are the chosen ones, with the ability to think independently. All the students listened attentively. The teacher did not speak for long, but only said 2 words. The teacher, Wen Saint-Lun, the rector of the university, addressed them. "Look here," he said. Then he raised his hand, from which lightning began to emanate, causing admiration among the students. He snapped his fingers, and a huge burst of energy appeared. The students began to cover their ears because of the loud sound. Clouds suddenly gathered in the sky, and thunder rumbled. Many thought that the rector was definitely not an ordinary person. There was some debate among the students as to whether he was a hidden type or a transcendental type, and in the end they decided that he was transcendental. The rector reassured the students, saying that it was too early for them to be surprised. One of the students noticed something unusual in the sky. A man appeared there, standing on a cloud, carefully watching what was happening. He jumped down sharply. The students started shouting, "Superman! Superman!" The man announced that even though he was beyond the pale, he would be a Superman for them today. Han is the vice-rector. There were enthusiastic cries in response, and someone even remarked that he was handsome. After this, the rector declared the ceremony closed and added that everything is possible for genetically modified people. Xiao thought that this was indeed the case, but he had a long way to go because the gene limit was just the beginning, and there was still much to come. In the large auditorium of Hidden Institute No. 1, students sat at their desks, listening to the professor. Wen Xiao is an exceptional vice dean and professor of gene evolution at Huaxia University. He greeted the first-year students, telling them that he would be teaching them 3 subjects over the next few years: training of spiritual power, the basics of the theory of the hidden type, and the basics of the practice of the hidden type. The professor smiled and showed the horn on his head, explaining that it was the result of a mistake during training. Anyone who wants to get the same horns can sleep in class. The professor noted that he personally did not object, and the students laughed. Shu thought that this was what Teacher Anne was talking about when she mentioned the useless gene base point. He was confident that with his good looks, everything would be fine. The teacher continued, noting that given the danger, it was worth starting the lesson. The assistants handed out the teaching tools, and Xiao thanked them as he accepted his. The teacher reminded that spiritual power is the basis for the hidden type, and announced the beginning of the first lesson on training spiritual power. The technology is designed to accumulate and test spiritual power at the initial and middle stages, and the material contained in the bottle was extremely rare. The teacher told him to take the bottle in his hands and concentrate completely on it, emphasizing that this was the only way to improve spiritual strength. He gave instructions to look carefully inside the bottle and feel its contents with all your might. The students began to focus their gaze, although the teacher warned that it would be difficult the first time, and he advised not to rush, slowly pouring energy into spiritual power. Suddenly, there was an explosion among the students, and the teacher asked anxiously what was going on. Xiao was shocked by what happened. Master Wen asked Xiao how he was feeling, worried about the flask explosion incident. Xiao replied that he only had a small scratch. The teacher noted that he had seen Xiao's name in the journal, mentioning that he was from the erudite class. He praised him for his talent, especially considering that Xiao immediately blew up the flask in the very first class. He suggested that in order to train Xiao's spiritual power for a while, he would need a heavier 20-gram stone instead of the usual ones. The teacher then suggested applying for a special quota for Xiao in the exceptional type, adding that he would negotiate with Teacher Anne if Xiao agreed. Xiao modestly replied that it was thanks to Teacher Anne's guidance that he was able to advance. Teacher Wen pointed out that the Department of Erudition was too limited and that the exclusive institute was the only place where Xiao could realize his potential. The teacher informed Xiao that he had several unique low-rank training methods specifically for the exceptional type, and he advised to try to use them, regardless of whether Xiao changed faculty. Shu was delighted and wondered if the method, affinity with metal, would work for his gun soy cartridges. The teacher explained that one can train using spiritual power and suggested moving on to a practical lesson. At this time, the students were discussing the fate of the guy whose flask exploded during class. Some assumed that he had very developed spiritual power, and that the teacher might have taken him away out of guilt. One of the students tried to stop the conversations, reminding him that the teacher had already returned. Xiao walked down the stairs, followed by the teacher. He was sorry. He wanted a quiet life, but he was again caught up in trouble. Sitting down, he listened as the teacher announced that despite the incident, the lesson would continue. The teacher reminded him of the importance of training and warned him of its dangers, and then introduced his assistant, student Dan Wei, a first-year student of the extreme speed type who has already unlocked 3 chains of genetic abilities and has an E rank. Dan Wei's 3 chains of genetic abilities amazed the students. Many of them did not even discover one. And this first-year student of the extreme type had already achieved such a result. They envied and admired at the same time. The teacher decided to draw the students' attention to the main drawback of the hidden type, since many only guessed what it was, but could not explain it exactly. He suggested a simple sparring session and asked the students to wear protective gear. The students' joy at the start of the practical lesson was obvious. After all, they had the opportunity to learn from a master. At this point, the student approached the teacher with a request. He wanted Shiao to spar with him. Shiao was surprised, and the teacher clarified that participation was voluntary and asked why Shiao was chosen. The student explained that a very strong newcomer had appeared at the Faculty of Erudition, and he wanted to conduct a practical exercise with him. The student encouraged Shiao, saying that it was just practice, and he should not act cowardly, but go on stage and show himself. Other students complained that their department was constantly criticized, and they were jealous of Shiao, but they couldn't even intervene. Everyone expected Shiao to accept the challenge, otherwise he would look weak. The opponent had 3 gene chains. Shiao noted that one could be weak, but not cowardly, and stood up resolutely so as not to embarrass himself. At this moment, another student, Jijan, suddenly stood up next to him and said that he also wanted to try his hand. He introduced himself as the owner of 2 chains of exceptional type genetic abilities, surprising Shiao. The students whispered among themselves, discussing Jen and considering him to be a real summoned genius among the first-year students of the faculty. Someone expressed confidence that he would definitely get punched in the face. Teacher Wen confirmed that Zhenya indeed had exceptional abilities of an exceptional type, and that his performance would be useful. The student's mind flashed with the thought that if Shiao had come out, he might have had nowhere to go, but now he decided to look at his opponent first. The student asked Teacher Wen if he agreed to the fight, to which the teacher replied yes, and pressed the remote control, turning the podium into a battlefield. He warned the participants to be prepared, not to overdo it, and to be careful, as injuries are possible in demonstration sparring. The sparring began with a powerful attack from a first-year student who used firepower. Deng Wei counterattacked, noting the opponent's slow reaction speed. John was surprised, but was already falling from the blow. The teacher called for calm as magical power exploded in the air, shocking the students. The third-year student quickly mounted the first-year student, demonstrating a clear advantage. The third-year student warned Zhejian that in a real fight, he would have died. The freshman asked to repeat, but the opponent refused. Denwei gave Jan 1 second to attack, noting the difficulty of the exceptional type. Jan admitted his carelessness. He realized that the people from the beyond had an advantage in speed and decided to first take a distance. The countdown began again, and the fight resumed. The teacher gave the start to the fight. They stood opposite each other, and the first-year student thought about tactics. Move away, wait for the right moment, and attack. Suddenly, the third-year student was already there and struck him in the face. The teacher thanked Zhang for his participation and asked him to return to his seat. He explained to the students that practice is important to become aware of one's weaknesses and reduce the risk of failure. The teacher then invited others who wanted to spar. The third-year student reminded him that he had not yet fought with Shiao. A classmate asked what Shiao would say. Shiao replied that he was willing to practice if Deng Wei wanted it that way. Shiao agreed to spar and went on stage. He decided to show that he was not afraid and was ready to fight. Jane advised keeping the opponent at a distance and attacking the opponent's weak left leg. Shiao thought about tactics, knowing that the fight might be difficult. When asked if he was okay with recording the fight, he approved, seeing it as an opportunity to learn from his mistakes and improve his skills. Shiao was not afraid to appear weak in front of others and was confident in himself. He quickly realized that the opponent had underestimated his speed and strength. The use of spiritual embodiment came as a surprise to everyone. Even the teacher was amazed that a newbie could handle such a technique. Despite this, the opponent tried to neutralize Xiao's advantage by delivering a surprise blow. Xiao felt pain and anger, their gazes met, the tension grew, and the third-year student rushed into a new attack. Although Xiao's telepathy allowed him to predict Deng Wei's attacks, his body was unable to react in time. He realized that he would have to train a lot from now on. Despite the variety of the enemy's techniques, telepathy helped to catch the trajectory of movements. Xiao aimed a spiritual triangle at Dan, but he deftly dodged it, thinking it was fun. The blow still landed, surprising the opponent. Deng Wei flew up to strike. Xiao blocked, but received a strong blow to the stomach and flew back, sitting on the floor and holding his bruise. Deng Wei approached and struck again, but the teacher intervened, stopping the fight and warning about the boundaries of the training. The teacher reproached Deng Wei for being too cruel, reminding him that Xiao had spared him twice and that victory was already on Deng's side. He stressed that if Xiao had wanted to strike a serious blow, things could have ended much worse. The third-year student smiled and defended his opinion that real combat training is first a fight, and then training. He said that genetically modified animals will face much more serious tests. And if they can't even handle this now, then why did they even come to the university? Xiao agreed. He offered a real fight. The teacher thought about it, but allowed the use of all abilities, considering the seriousness of the training. The third-year student, preparing for the fight, warned that he would make every effort to knock Xiao off his feet. Xiao, realizing the importance of the moment, asked permission to fully reveal his powers to show everything he was capable of. Xiao confirmed that he could already use his special ability. The third-year student was surprised to hear about the soybean Superman. Xiao smiled, noting that the metal balls were left at home. The students discussed the upcoming fight with interest. Student Lin asked her friend Chin Chin for her necklace, which she generously agreed to. Xiao accepted the necklace from Student Lin. He thanked her and confirmed that there should be enough pearls. Reminding the third-year student of the previous mercy, Xiao warned him to be careful, because now the fight was in full swing. He understood that the enemy's speed was high, and he thought about how to speed up his throwing attacks. The third-year student also said that he would fight seriously and would not stop until Xiao himself asked for mercy. Xiao attacked first with a spiritual cone, but it was destroyed by the opponent's strike. When the third-year student laughed at this attempt, Xiao angrily replied that he had prepared more. He swung again, but heard a sarcastic question. How long would it last? Xiao forced him to jump into the air with his attacks, so he was slower, and he delivered the decisive blow. The third-year student fell to the floor, struck by an unexpected blow. He writhed in pain, while Xiao stood there with a slight smile, holding the remaining pearls in his hand. A buzz went up in the auditorium. Students jumped up from their seats, applauding and shouting words of admiration in support of Xiao. Xiao didn't just win, he did it spectacularly, proving that the power of the hidden type is not inferior to the transcendental. The moment when the cones distracted the opponent's attention turned out to be just a distraction. The main trump card was precision, calculation, and surprise. The room fell silent. The noise, joy, and support of the students instantly disappeared, replaced by tension and anxiety. Everyone watched what was happening. The testicles were badly damaged, as well as the legs, which is the main problem. Even surgery can leave consequences. Teacher Wen briefly explained the situation to the medic, focusing on first aid and the need for immediate treatment. He decided to postpone filing a report on the incident until the victim's condition stabilized. The medics agreed and carried the third-year student away, leaving the classroom in tense silence. Xiao, returning to his place, sighed heavily, feeling tired after the battle and mentally tense. Jen approached him and expressed surprise at what had happened, noticing how much damage had been done to the enemy. Xiao, without feeling any regret, merely emphasized that if he had been too soft, he could have been the one in the victim's place. Teacher Wen, having assessed the atmosphere in the classroom, tried to bring the students back to the academic track. He noted that the incident was unexpected, but taught an important lesson to everyone present. Emphasizing the status of first-year students, he recalled that they are under the protection of the university for 3 months. However, after this period, such traumas may become part of their reality. He assured that the university provides professional medical care, and therefore students should not worry unnecessarily. Then, homework came onto the students' screens. The return to the learning process marked the end of a difficult but memorable lesson. The chat message spread quickly. The upstart from the Institute of the Transcendent type was defeated. The defeat came from a representative of the hidden type. The blinds in Xiao's room were closed. He was sitting on the sofa. Fatigue was felt in his gaze and posture. He remembered how he blew up the flask in the morning and fought with Deng Wei. All this happened in one day. Xiao sighed heavily as a notification from his roommate appeared on the screen. These were the rules of the dorm. Flush after yourself. Clean the shower. Keep an eye on the sink. No overnight guests. The washing machine couldn't wash underwear, socks, etc. Xiao sighed again, his eyes full of fatigue and doom. A guy with black hair, dressed in a third-year student's uniform, entered the room. He introduced himself, and it became clear that this was Lo Muron, his new roommate. Xiao froze, recognizing him as a celebrity, the university's idol. The guy was incredibly handsome, and Xiao couldn't help but feel surprised inside. Lumaruan asked if Xiao had read the rules and recommended that he accept them. Otherwise, he would have to change the room through the manager. Xiao agreed without objection, deciding that the senior clearly didn't like unnecessary talk and had difficulty getting along with people. Xiu quietly laughed to himself, but Lumruan didn't understand the reason for his laughter and gave him an appraising look. He noticed that Xiao was injured and commented on his appearance, comparing him to a squeezed lemon. Lumruan doubted that Xiao would survive even the 3-month defense period for freshmen. Xiao was surprised to remember that Teacher Wen had also mentioned 3 months of protection from violence. Lumaruan gave Xiao some healing ointments and advised him to use them when changing the bandage. Xiao thanked the senior and then asked for more details about the deadline for first-year students to defend their theses. Lumaruan was surprised by his ignorance and began to explain that all gene evolution universities encourage competition. He explained that at Huaxia University, students also compete for resources and training privileges. The best students are annually included in the top 100 rankings, where awards and status are distributed. The one who takes first place gets the title of Dragon, and the first 10 get the title of Tiger. Each place on the list brings rewards, resources, and respect within the university. 1 place every 3 days, 4 capsules E and 1 D. 2 to 10 places, 3 capsules E, 1140 to 2 capsules E. 41 to 70 to 1 capsule E. 71 to 100 to 30 F, and 1 E every 6 days. A D-rank energy capsule is 10,000 yuan. Out of the blue, the university does a lot of work for the students. She realized that the university was really cruel. The 3-month period was only a temporary protection for newcomers. After that, the real selection began. Gifted students compete without limits, despite the risk of injury, disability, death, and expulsion. Life at university is a constant struggle where only the strongest survive. Shiao realized that there were many trials ahead, and the preparation had to be as serious as possible. He had already become a target. Lumaruan left, leaving Xiao alone with thoughts about the future and the challenges that lay ahead. Xiao thought about the complexities of his relationship with Lumarun. He realized that the older man was witty, but deep down, he was kind. The thought of being targeted by Yuan and Deng Wei troubled him. Videos of their fights gave him an idea of their strength. He decided to focus on training. studying the methods of Master Wen. He especially hoped to master the skill Joy with Metal, which could significantly enhance his abilities. People were walking leisurely on the street, and aircraft were flying above them. Xiao felt refreshed after the shower, as if he had been born again. The phone suddenly rang and he picked it up. A senior student reported an online post by the nickname Shot Vetchen that Xiao was discussing. This shot of eternity was ranked 72nd in the exceptional faculty rankings. Xiao decided to contact him himself, taking into account the warning. The thought of new hate was spinning in his head. He opened the university news, which spoke of a freshman who was threatening students of an outrageous nature and had recently maimed one of them. Xiao was surprised by the attention and the consequences of his actions. Xiao thought the post was simplistic and made him look bad. He decided to contact Senior Liang. Qingjiang. Xiao introduced himself and explained that the post was incomplete and could cause misunderstandings. The senior asked if he wanted to settle the situation. Xiao replied that he did not want conflict and wanted the students to know the truth. In response, the senior student demanded 500,000 to correct the post. The senior laughed and said he was just joking and had no intention of ripping off the student. Xiao was angry, but he saw no point in changing his post, as he believed it was true. Xiao reproached the elder for spreading rumors and asked where he had lied. The old man replied that he was too busy and hung up. He thought that the youth were naive. Xiao thought Lian is very cunning. His loopholes cannot be fixed. He decided to complain, but realized that this would not solve the problem, and prepared for action. Xiao entered the building of Section 3F of the Discipline Department. The girl asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted to file a complaint about blackmail and extortion on the school website. The deputy asked to explain what happened. Xiao showed the recording. Teacher Wang said that the matter was serious, but now he needed to go to a meeting. Liani's account, the punishment will come later. The girl confirmed the words of the deputy director. Meanwhile, the Huaxia University of Gene Evolution held an extraordinary meeting. The rector asked if everyone was present. They replied that, with the exception of the director of the discipline department and several committees, everyone was here. They reported that the topic of the question was the fight between Xiao and Den Wei. Everyone was asked to express their opinion on the incident. Zhou said that Xiao was being too cruel and needed to be punished. Wei said that the training was normal and that Deng Wei was the first to attack. He also said that Xiao had been held back twice. Han Qingsong said that the counterattack was reasonable, but the injury was serious. Kong Linfang stressed the need for punishment, but not too severe. Yang Chen of the Educational Affairs Department said that Deng Wei had bad intentions and took away the recording of the fight. This caused the problem. The office felt that Deng Wei should bear the main responsibility. The rector listened and asked Teacher Wen for his opinion. Teacher Wen admitted his responsibility for not supervising the fight enough. The rector noted that Wen should have reprimanded Deng Wei seriously right away. He failed to do so, which was a breach of official duties. The rector emphasized that it was necessary to immediately contact the Hidden Institute and post the full video of the battle. The teachers' inattention caused a stir. The rector reproached the teachers for their personal conflicts and reminded them that they should support the students. He stressed that teachers are the main mentors and must unite. Wen Xiao is held responsible for the situation. After the meeting, they will decide what to do with him. Teacher Wen agreed with the decision. They promised to give him a warning, and Xiao will also be punished. He emphasized that without the spirit of resistance, there is no future for the university. He expressed concerns for the future of all humanity without struggle and fortitude. The rector suggested that Wen Xiao take the main responsibility and conduct educational talks with students and teachers. Everyone agreed. Deputy Director Wang entered the office and announced that he had finished preparing a full report on the incident. The rector looked at the screen carefully. The teachers were surprised, not understanding what was happening. The rector brought up unexpected information on the screen. He did not expect this to happen at the university. Lian Jingchang used his popularity to extort 900,000 yuan. The video is in the information section. The rector expressed dissatisfaction and called for the director to be replaced if he did not cope well. Lian sat behind the screen. He laughed. Did Xiao really think that if his number was blocked, he couldn't do anything? There was a knock on the door. The man in glasses introduced himself as being from the investigation department of Kyoto University. Liang's arrest for blackmail and extortion. Lian was surprised by what was happening. There was a scream in the street. The boys were surprised by the news that their videos had been deleted, and they were losing their earnings. The university issued announcement number 533. Third-year students, including Liang and Liu, used the influence of the video account to extort and blackmail. The damages amounted to over 1 million yuan. The case was referred to the court. Professor Wen was dismissed from his post for failing to respond promptly to a freshman's injury. The university calls for fierce competition to produce strong heroes. She sat in the lotus position, concentrating on developing his abilities. He opened his eyes. The last 36th base point of the first level was activated. It usually takes 6 months to fully develop the first level, but he did it in 4 weeks. Although the spiritual power had not yet reached its limit, its intensity had increased significantly. He was confident that in the next battle, his spiritual cone would not break so easily. Telepathy. He could now sense the world of thoughts within a radius of 6 meters, larger than his room. He tried to look over the wall. In the senior students' room, there was a martial arts training session going on, and an interesting book was lying nearby. Suddenly, the elder shouted something sharply. Xiao was frightened and asked himself what it was. The neighbor's door opened, and Xiao was surprised. The idol asked if it was him. Xiao apologized, explaining that he just tried it out of curiosity. The neighbor praised him for his achievement, 4 meters in a month, and warned him to be careful. Otherwise, the response would be painful. Xiao promised not to peek anymore. The idol revealed that his abilities are not just genetic, but an ancient martial art called Lion's Roar, tailored to his genetic points. This art is able to counter telepathy, which surprised Xiao. The idol noted that there are many types of genetic abilities. Xiao is still a rookie. The ancient martial art was tailored to the gene points, Xiao thought. He asked Elder Luo to borrow a book to learn. Luo agreed, but set a condition. He would bring the book personally, but forbade anyone from entering his room and peeping. Xiao promised not to break the rules. After a while, he was sitting on the floor among the books and reading. In the room, audience of erudition, Xiao was immersed in the book. He thought about meditation, Taoist, Buddhist, Bhavana, and yoga, simplified over 100 years. He remembered that his dad taught him to meditate, to relax and breathe deeply. He decided to ask Idol for details. Suddenly a guy came up. The headman, he suggested going to the canteen. He treats. Another guy added that Yu Yang was inviting the whole group. Xiao hid the book in his bag and agreed to go with his classmates. A man appeared at the entrance, Lich Zhan, a third-year student in the speed class. He challenges Xiao to a duel. Jane rebuked them for their behavior. The seniors said that they were misunderstood. They were not like Deng Wei. Xiao asked if they were here for revenge. The girl explained that identical twins were not included in that category. One of the group pointed out that Deng Wei was too self-confident and wanted to become famous. Everyone laughed. The senior student suggested getting to the point and talked about the upcoming dragon and tiger rating. They want to fight Xiao to improve their combat experience. Xiao realized that they are preparing for this ranking. The guy offered to fight Xiao in the training building with a teacher judge on duty. The opponents prepared money in advance. He refused to waste time. The senior offered 3 E-rank capsules for 3 battles. Another guy raised the bet to 4 capsules for 4 exits. Xiao thought about the offer. The winner gets a prize. The fourth combat hall of the training building was indeed large and sturdy. The university invested heavily to build it to withstand thermal and energy weapons fire, which corresponded to the status of a higher educational institution. The teacher warned the participants not to overdo it and not to injure each other. Especially when it came to Xiao, it was a reminder of the past incidents. Xiao confirmed that he understood. He then asked who would go first, and the senior volunteered to start the fight. The girl and the others watched the fight. The teacher asked if everyone was ready, and after confirmation gave the command to begin. The senior student was the first to attack, and Xiao advised not to rush with full force right away. The duel began. The senior laughed, stating that students of the extreme type should always attack with all their might. The girl explained that the hidden type needed to keep their distance in battle, and they had better shorten it as soon as possible against Xiao, which surprised Jen. The high school student rushed to attack, and Jen urged Xiao not to stand still. He noted that Xiao had used a spiritual cone to knock Dongua down, but he considered it a simple trick, to direct the cone so that the opponent would involuntarily jump. The high school student threw a punch, but collided with a force field. He admitted that it was Xiao's spiritual abilities that scared him, because tricks didn't work against absolute power. He then destroyed the force field with his fist, causing shock among the audience. He smiled, but immediately hit another block, another layer of protection, and felt that he could not continue any further. The senior student was amazed to notice that the second barrier had just been gone, and he guessed that Xiao had created two barriers at the same time in order to hide them. Xiao explained that this tactic was common. To compensate for one's weaknesses, one could place two barriers in one place. The high school student was surprised by the strength of the shield, as if it were made of stone. The teacher suggested that if there is no fracture, it is worth applying ice and ointment, and if there is a fracture, an injection that will help restore the arm in 2 days. The senior asked for permission to continue the fight, claiming it was just a hand. The teacher announced that Xiao had won the match. The spectators cheered enthusiastically, and a boy from the crowd volunteered next. The teacher confirmed time and time again that Xiao had won. He had beaten a senior boy and girl, and then a third opponent. The seniors admitted that they learned a lot from fighting with Xiao. One of them, with his hand bandaged, suggested meeting again, but Xiao insisted on the same payment terms. They agreed and left the building. Xiao thought that these were good guys and that he had made a good profit, although he could have just spent time in the lab. At the end, he cursed under his breath. Xiao suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to clean the lab. When his classmates shouted at him to have lunch together, he replied that he had unfinished business and ran away quickly. Reaching the auditorium with a bucket and a mop, he tidied up the lab, poured in the solutions, and finally completed his day's duties. However, when he was about to leave, Xiao caught a sharp smell of blood coming from the next room. Suspicion immediately turned into wariness. He decided that someone wanted to fight him again. Without a moment's hesitation, he threw the bucket and mop aside, preparing for battle. The noodles were eaten. The professor sat at the table thinking about the taste of the food. The taste was surprisingly pleasant. She admitted that Xiao was indeed a good cook. In response, Xiao said that when he smelled blood, he thought someone had broken into the room. He asked where Professor Anne had been all these days. She looked very tired and injured. He was particularly interested in her fingers, which had injuries. The first question he asked was how she managed to restore her severed fingers. The professor was not surprised. It was as if she had foreseen this interest. She only said that it was time to move on to the next stage, to the experiment. They left the building and headed to another hidden room. On the way, the professor reminded him that if Xiao hadn't been lazy, he would have found this place himself a long time ago. Xiao tried to justify himself by saying that he had been cleaning the lab all this time. The professor just smiled slightly and said that if he was interested in how her fingers had recovered, he would find out now. In the huge flask in front of Xiao, a body identical to Professor An was swaying. He immediately realized this was a clone, and, apparently, it was from him that the teacher received new fingers. She uses clones to restore the body, he thought. Then he wondered if she uses all these clones solely for healing purposes. The professor replied that it was not only that. Clones were needed for both medicine and scientific research. Xiao turned around. There were capsules behind him. He asked if there were clones of her there too. The professor calmly replied that no, not only hers. Some of them were clones of Xiao himself. He was slightly surprised, but did not panic. He asked when exactly she had managed to obtain his genetic material. The answer was laconic. On the day he received a pass to the lab. This was enough for a full genetic reconstruction. The professor immediately got down to business. She ordered modules 10 through 50 to be deployed in the large hall. An experiment was to be conducted. Xiao nodded, accepting the new task. Xiao entered the main hall of the complex with the professor. The professor pointed to the control terminal. She showed where the biometric code was entered and noted the button for releasing liquid nitrogen. In case of emergency sterilization, she indicated an emergency shutdown, which should only be used in case of an immediate threat. There are only about 10 such machines in the world capable of stable human cloning. 2 of them are located in Huaxia. 1, right here in Institute 14. Can it be considered such a valuable object as to justify the use of such a rare resource? The professor, without taking her eyes off the capsules, calmly laid out the basics. The direction to which Institute number 14 belonged was called Whimsy, one of the least publicized. It existed on the edge of official science and experimental, almost borderline technologies. Despite the recognition and unique scientific achievements, the results of the Institute's research provoked hatred among others. Some believed that Institute 14's methods went too far, especially in matters of cloning and mind control. Shiao realized that he was now part of this closed system, but there was no hesitation in his voice. He had already made his choice. Now that Xiao had officially become a part of the Wonder Direction, the line between human and superhuman was becoming thinner and thinner for him. The queen bee belongs to an evolving species, the black crown bee. She is capable of controlling tens of thousands of bees and has spiritual power. The Institute tried to introduce spiritual gene data. The goal was to obtain enhanced mental potential and inherit the skills of the womb itself. Mental control is the ability of a queen bee to manage a large number of worker bees. Mental control chain. Ability to remotely control worker bees. Mental support is an offensive ability. The queen bee can mentally suppress, punish, or even destroy worker bees. The method of introducing spiritual genes is too straightforward and crude. Because of this, the probability of genetic rejection exceeded 90%. This is why clones were necessary. They served as experimental bodies, reducing the risk of losing the real host. Although the transfer of consciousness took place into the body of a clone, all the pain that the participant experienced was felt in full, without the slightest dulling. Xiao just shrugged. Free procedures are not capricious. The professor nodded. Since he has already decided, let him sit in the chair. It was a device to synchronize the mind with the clone's body. It should release all the spiritual power and transfer the consciousness to the new body. She sat silently. The professor asked if he was ready. He nodded. The professor said, "Start," and pressed the switch. The professor closely watched what was happening in the hall. One of the clones, identical to Xiao's body, slowly slid out of the capsule and stood up. The professor immediately asked how I was feeling, whether I was experiencing any discomfort or loss of control. Xiao, who had already adapted to the clone's body, replied that everything was fine. He had complete control over the body, and did not feel any deviations. The professor gave the order to begin. Under the glass partition there was a narrow recess, the injection site. Xiao didn't hesitate to put his hand in. The professor warned him. This was the moment of truth. She didn't want him to let her down. Recording started. Experiment number 1. Subject. Clone Xiao. Injection. Extract of the black crown queen bee. The solution penetrated his hand. Almost immediately, Xiao felt a slight dizziness. He managed to say that he was getting sleepy, and a moment later he lost his balance, went limp, and fell to the laboratory floor. The experiment with the black crown queen bee ended in brain death 10 seconds after the injection, which was recorded by the professor. She asked Xiao what he felt at the moment of death. He replied that he felt nothing except a severe headache. After this, they decided to proceed to the second experiment. Xiao repeatedly connected to the clones, each time dying and being reborn in a new body. There were already many bodies lying in the hall, accumulated from unsuccessful attempts. The professor expressed disappointment, admitting that the experiment had failed again. But Xiao insisted on continuing, suggesting they try again. The professor agreed to conduct one last experiment. During each injection, the professor wondered what exactly was going wrong during the procedure. Suddenly, Xiao turned to her and said that this time everything worked. The professor confirmed the success with surprise. Taking off his helmet on the chair, Xiao felt tired but happy. The professor asked about his condition. Xiao reported that he could, and that his spiritual power had increased by at least 25%. She asked about the abilities he had acquired. Xiao noted that he felt 2 abilities, the mental control chain and the mental whip. The professor was surprised, confirming that he had indeed adopted the mental whip. Xiao, exhausted, fell to his knees. The professor decided to test his new skills, but Xiao asked to rest and eat a little to recover. After eating, Xiao noted that the experiment was a success, but very tiring. The professor praised him for his excellent work and expressed gratitude for the achievements made with less than 40 clones. She called a robot named Ahuan, who brought her a drink. The robot noted that when Xiao saw the professor's clone, his pupils and heartbeat changed dramatically. The professor explained that Ahuang is the Institute's dedicated supercomputer, comparable to the supercomputer at Shenyang University. The main building is located on Lanxin. Ahuan has an unhealthy interest in secret observations, and that piece of iron is just a shell. Xiao thought that in addition to the 2 control devices, Ahuan also had his own artificial intelligence. He was glad that he entered Research Institute number 14. At this moment, Xiao's heartbeat quickened, and the robot noted that he was probably thinking about something bad. Xiao thought that Ahuang was not the smartest intellect. The professor looked tired, but decided to continue the experiment, noting that since Xiao had the strength to quarrel with Ahuang, she needed to hurry. The professor said that from now on, Xiao would receive special privileges, second only to her own and some teachers. Xiao then asked if he could start training right away for fear of breaking something. The professor agreed to a small test and suggested activating the skill and attacking her. Xiao began by using a mental whip. A huge glowing whip erupted from his forehead and wrapped around the professor. She noted that this was the first time erudition had received this skill, so its combat effectiveness needed to be tested. At the same time, she allowed Xiao to attack not only the head, but also other parts of the body. Xiao agreed. The professor explained that Xiao lacked power due to his lower spiritual power reserves compared to her. Therefore, attacks below the neck are not yet effective, although they may work on other parts of the body. She noted that the first time he used very little spiritual power, and with experience, he would be able to use between 1/10 and half of his power in one attack, which will be much more powerful and impressive. Xiao was very exhausted after the exercise. The professor praised him, admitting that everything was much better than she expected. He was a genetic miracle. the only one who acquired two skills at once. She said that others, even the founder, had only received one skill. The professor suggested that they take a rest while she prepared a detailed report. If the basic centers of the mental control chain can be accurately determined, the effectiveness of their research will increase significantly. The professor explained that the erudition class trains very hard, and the liquid of the black crown queen bee will help in this process. It is extremely difficult to obtain the body of a queen bee, and it is impossible to find new volunteers, so now only the two of them remain at Research Institute number 14. The robot, playfully complaining, spoke of a broken heart because the professor forgot about him. The professor reminded that there were three of them, she, Shiao, and the robot, Huang. She then handed Shiao a box as a token of gratitude for his work. Shiao opened the box and saw a keychain. The professor asked him if he knew what it was. Shiao guessed it was a flying sword like the ones he had seen in movies, and he assumed he could launch it 100 miles. The professor corrected him that 100 miles was too much, but up to 100 meters he would be able to control the sword without any problems. The professor asked what kind of flask Shiao was using now. He replied that it was a 100-gram one. She said that was enough. Since Shiao had obtained the mental control chain, it would be easy for him to learn how to control the flying sword. She suggested giving it a try, and he agreed. Shiao noted that controlling the sword took a lot of effort. The professor explained that this was just the beginning, and that he would get used to it over time. The theoretical range of the chain could reach 500 kilometers, but with his current level of spiritual power, he should try 100 meters for now. Shiao pointed the sword in the air and almost reached 100 meters. The professor asked to return the sword in the same condition. The sword began to return, and the professor noted that it could simply have slowed down as the chain returned. Shiao laughed and said that he would know next time. The professor warned him not to act rashly. Shiao would do better if he tried. After returning the sword, she advised him to train harder, focusing on controlling acceleration, deceleration, and turning. At that moment, the professor's mobile phone rang. She answered and said that she would be right out. The professor then told Shiao that they needed to go because someone was waiting for them. Shiao followed her down the hallway, noticing the teacher's serious expression and wondering who it could be. Shiao and the professor sat at the table opposite Teacher Wei. The professor immediately understood that the visit was not accidental, but connected with the past. Teacher Wei mentioned that their Research Institute number 14 had a new employee. There was no room in the warehouse. He emitted a strong aura and had already undergone spiritual mutation. The teacher asked that the professor, since she had already finished working with the student, allow other staff members to use the available modules. The professor explained that the next step is to fully develop the Shiao clone for further medical research and long-term experiments. Teacher Wei asked to allocate at least one module, but the professor sternly replied that if he repeated such a request, the conversation would go differently. Teacher Wei reminded that the university's rules and regulations have not been cancelled, and that he is simply following the requirements. She said that if the research was not successful and they did not provide the equipment for cloning, funding would be cut by about 80%, and the initiator of the budget cuts was Commissioner Liu. The professor suggested talking to the commissioner. He had long wanted to use their laboratory. Teacher Wei admitted that he was not the only one interested, but in the end, he promised to cooperate and urged the professor to remain calm, since she was a member of the genetics committee. Qiu thought about it and asked him how much money the institute needed to operate normally for a year. 50 million a year, he replied. Qiu asked if he was the reason for the pressure on the professor, but the teacher replied that Qiu was just an excuse, and the reasons were much deeper. The influence grows, and the founder's idea of cloning attracts their attention. Previously, there were comrades, but some left and others betrayed them. The teacher urged Qiu to grow up quickly and help. When Xiao asked how exactly he could help Professor An, the teacher replied that there were many ways. New research, evaluation of the effectiveness of work. But there is also a more direct and effective method. Xiao was surprised to hear about the dragon and tiger rankings, with the top 10 students at the top of the list. A first-year student's inclusion in this ranking would mean recognition of their research institute's contribution. The professor asked where Teacher Wei had gone. Xiao replied that he had already left. She then advised Xiao to train more with the flying sword, not forgetting about the maintenance of the research laboratory and the cultivation warehouse. If something is unclear, he can contact Ahuan. When Xiao asked the professor about her plans, she said she would undertake a number of tasks to obtain funding. It was sunny outside. Xiao walked along the road slowly. He thought about the ranking of the dragon and tigers, deciding which tactics to choose. Suddenly, Brother Jai came up to him. Frightened by the unexpected appearance, Xiao screamed. Jai mumbled something about tactics. Jai called him Don Juan, reminding him that he had called him. Xiao asked him if he wanted to train together. He agreed and stated that he was ranked 89th among the second-year students and was not going to give in. He was heading to the battle hall and was going to show off his abilities. They entered the training room, where a girl stood in the middle of the room. Both boys' gazes involuntarily lingered on her, creating a tense atmosphere in the air before the start of training. "Brother," the senior student introduced, "this is my girlfriend, Achi Kanen. She asked me not to call her anything." Achi Hanen pointed out that Jai was late. The senior explained that he met Xiao on the way and invited him to spar. The girl noted that since he was training with a senior student, it meant he must be strong. Jai added that he had defeated the identical warrior Deng Wei. So, if he could defeat such a warrior, Xiao was really strong. The girl complained that because of their relationship, she had to wait a lot. Then she confidently declared that in a duel with Xiao, victory would be on her side and prepared for the fight. The senior reminded her that she was ranked 32nd among sophomores and advised her not to overdo it. Xiao didn't want to fight his girlfriend. The girl warned that she was starting the fight. Xiao said that he was ready, and she rushed to attack. Xiao guessed that since the girl was familiar with Deng Wei, she probably knew his techniques as well. However, she attacked directly and clearly had her own fighting style. In her hand was a weapon with a sheath, with which she broke the protective shield. She shouted a challenge, and suddenly the ground around the girl cracked, and he was pushed back by a powerful shock wave. He landed on his feet, and the girl pulled her weapon out of the ground and continued her attack. Xiao was amazed by her strength, speed, and skill. They were significantly different from what he had seen from Deng Wei, Lin, and Zhang. He thought that spiritual strength alone was not enough to fight against senior students. Although Xiao really wanted to experiment with controlling the mental chain, there was no suitable one at hand. The flying sword was too dangerous in this kind of battle. He created a shield, focusing on defense. The girl challenged him to a fight and attacked, delivering a powerful blow to the shield. She continued to advance, using a weapon with sharp spikes that shattered the shield into tiny pieces. She remained prepared, although he understood that now he would have to use more serious techniques. At the most tense moment, a mental whip appeared from Xiao's forehead, instantly wrapping itself around the girl and knocking her off her feet. The senior student hurried to check her condition and noticed that foam began to come out of the girl's mouth, which caused surprise and alarm. Xiao was filled with horror as he realized how powerful the mental whip was. He watched the girl carefully, trying to understand why her expression seemed so unusual. He hadn't done anything unusual to cause such a reaction. He admitted that he wasn't very good at understanding the mental whip. The senior explained that the current generation of the forbidden type is becoming stronger, but also getting more injuries, and it is not his fault. After that, Xiao decided to leave. The senior insisted that he would take care of the girl himself. Xiao thought as he noticed Zhou licking his upper lip. and he realized that he had allowed him to knock out the girl, using a sneaky method to make her defenseless. As Xiao started to leave, the girl stopped him and asked him to wait. Chu gave her some water to drink. Xiao asked if she felt better, but she asked him to look at something important. Xiao picked up the screen. It was broadcasting a fight, a match between students from the Indian Federation and representatives from the star regions of Korea. On the screen, there was a match between students. One of them, armed with a dagger, attacked the other and delivered a precise blow to the throat. The victim grabbed his neck and fell to the ground. Medics immediately ran to him with a stretcher. The attacker stood to the side, smiling, and the crowd chanted his name. Xiao, holding the screen in his hands, felt the tension rising. It was a university fight, but the level of violence seemed excessive. Although the victim was saved, the consequences of such a blow could not be avoided. It will probably stay with him for the rest of his life. Even in the dragon and tiger matches, deaths occurred, despite the presence of teachers and protective equipment. There was always a risk. Xiao noted to himself that the attacker acted deliberately, as if he wanted to cause real pain. It turned out to be Azari, a top 10 student and a participant in a recent university exchange program. He was in the spotlight because of the methods he used. The next stage of the competition is to be held at their own university. Xiao thought about it. He was still a freshman. He couldn't understand how he could help if he didn't even meet the formal criteria. However, the girl pointed out that in a recent fight, a student suddenly froze. The same thing happened to her during a sparring match with Xiao. The reason could be mental attacks. Mental skills are hard to block, and standard defenses don't work against them. According to her teacher, there are only two ways to counter attacks. The first is to open the chain of genetic abilities. Strengthening mental protection or spiritual strength, this path is difficult. The second method is more accessible, hardening, gradually getting used to mental damage. She suggested using his mental skill as a means of training for her own tempering, and as a way for Xiao to understand and master his ability. It seemed to him an unusual and slightly cruel way of training, but there was sense in her words. He understood that he himself lacked practical experience at the moment. He sighed, pulled himself together, and gave his consent. Hongin wanted to continue, but Xiao stopped her. He had overdone it a bit today, and she needed to rest. The girl was still having trouble standing on her feet after the previous sparring, but she refused help, trying to maintain her dignity. The senior student fussily offered to carry it, but she only waved her hand tiredly. Xiao looked away and grinned. Two of a kind, he thought. Now it's time for the next step. Develop offensive tactics and practice as much as possible. Theory is important, but real combat is a different matter. Xiao went outside. It was a busy day. Xiao met his neighbor Luo Murong on a busy street, where he instantly attracted the attention of the crowd, especially the girls, who squealed with delight. Muron seemed to be used to this and did not react in any way. Xiao, noticing him, hurried to meet him, waving his hand happily. He spoke immediately, his voice filled with enthusiasm. He said that he had already read all the books given by Muron, and now a lot of questions had accumulated in his head, especially on the topic of meditation. However, Luo Murong did not share this fervor and abruptly interrupted Xiao's flow of words. He was in a hurry to attend a lecture on ancient martial arts. Xiao tried to ask him to join him, but he replied that participation required an invitation or recommendation. It sounded serious, and Xiao noted that the event was clearly not for everyone. Muron for 2 weeks. He sighed heavily, but still waved his hand, and Xiao followed with glee. The streets were bustling with activity. Traffic filled the roads and the sky. Air cars glided through the air. Xiu couldn't help but be surprised as he looked back at the flying air cars. He asked Luo Murong if this method of transportation was expensive. He answered calmly. The cost was a little over 2 million. For an ordinary person, this is an unaffordable sum. Luo recalled that although he comes from a wealthy family, he earned everything he has now. He explained to Xiao that in the new era, genetically modified humans are at the top of the evolutionary ladder. For them, 2 million is just payment for 1 or 2 tasks, albeit associated with enormous risk. Such missions are beyond the understanding of ordinary people, but they are available to students whose strength meets the university's requirements. Today's lecture was given by Shen Jushuang, Vice Chairman of the Ancient Jin Martial Arts Association. His strength is comparable to that of a rector. Among those present were many students from different universities studying ancient techniques. Luo Murong reminded Xiao that if he wanted to understand more and clear his doubts, he should first listen carefully to the lecture. In the hall full of students and guests, the girl waved her hand, attracting Luo Murong's attention. She happily announced that since early morning, since 5 o'clock, she had taken the 2 best seats especially for him. Luo Murong thanked her in a restrained manner and pointed to the chair next to him, inviting Xiao to sit down. At the same time, he noted that if he was uncomfortable, he could choose another, more distant place. She sat down without hesitation, but the girl was clearly unhappy with this arrangement. To balance the situation, Luo Murong suggested choosing one of the 2 places, keeping the third one for himself. The girl, suppressing her irritation, nevertheless gave in. It flashed through her mind that it would be better for Brother Murong to sit next to this freshman than to get surrounded by other, more annoying girls. She resolutely moved, giving Murong the desired place. Xiao, watching what was happening, felt a tense atmosphere, as if an almost physically perceptible wave of anger was emanating from the girl. He said that everyone dreamed of being in his place, but Luo Murong replied briefly, even a little distantly, that he wouldn't understand. The lecture has begun. Everyone present already had an idea about ancient genetic martial arts, so the lecturer decided not to repeat commonly known things. Xiao, upon entering the hall, immediately bought a notebook and pen to carefully write down everything the teacher said. The topic of discussion was energy fields. Half an hour later, the lecturer explained that in the ancient Jin martial arts school, the energy field is often called internal qi, or true qi. The lecturer invited interested students to try to feel the energy field right now, emphasizing that the secrets of cultivation are not suitable for everyone, and everyone must act within their capabilities. If someone feels tisi, a special state of energy, he can press a button under the seat armrest to lock the moment. Xiao asked Luo Murong if this was the main method. Murong confirmed, noting that he himself had once started with this. Xiao asked how long it took Murong to sense the qi. Murong, calling himself a genius, replied that it only took him an hour. Xiao thought for a moment and pressed the button on the armrest to record the qi sensation. Luo Murong noticed this and asked if Xiao felt it, and he replied that the sensation appeared almost immediately. Luo Murong was at a loss. 2 assistants approached Xiao and asked if he really felt the qi, since it had only been 15 minutes. They didn't believe him. Xiao assured that there was no doubt about it. The assistants recognized Luo, and he vouched for Xiao. The assistants suggested that Xiao might have been practicing earlier and suggested that they show him to the master, the Venerable Shen. They approached the teacher. The assistant introduced the young man and asked the master to look at him. The master suggested that Xiao try to feel the qi in the same way he had just done. Xiao closed his eyes, and the master noted how quickly he fell into meditation. The master asked Murong if he had taught Xiao personally. Murong replied that he had not taught, but Xiao had studied his books. The master approved, noting that Xiao could indeed sense qi and had potential. The master invited Xiao to join the Ancient Martial Arts Association. Xiao explained that he was already a member of another school, the Jin Miracle, and it would be incorrect to join another organization. The master was surprised to learn the name of the school and its founder, Mr. Shan. Dantian, the center of concentration of vital energy, within 7 days. And he will be able to concentrate the internal QE there. He will personally take on his training. And this made Xiao and Murong surprised. Luo Murong noticed that Xiao had learned a lot today and praised him. Xiao replied that it was thanks to Senior Murong. Suddenly, the bell rang. The senior asked what had happened to the professor and why she had not answered the call. Xiao didn't understand what it was about at first, but the senior advised him to read the news. Xiao began to search for popular search queries online, which included a hot female professor being challenged. And also about the arrival of the delegation from the Indian Federation, there was a public provocation and an invitation to the battle arena of Huaxia University with a call to appear. Xiao was surprised by what was happening and tried to understand what exactly was going on. The professor was sitting in her office at the computer when Xiao arrived at noon. She was surprised by his arrival at this time, and he explained that he had important business. She said that the provocation initiated by Hiroji was being discussed on Weibo, and that he was very worried about it. Xiao asked if she was going to answer the call. He suggested taking a picture of his hand and sending it to show that it was not okay. The professor took this as a hint of an admission of defeat, but Xiao denied it. She said that she knew how worried he was about her. The professor said that the last time she suffered was due to Hiroji's mental attacks. Their school also studies these techniques, but he couldn't handle the Black Crown Queen alone and used dirty methods. He attacked her when she was weakened from the fight, and now challenges her again despite her injuries. Hiroji's behavior and the professor, despite everything, decided to teach him a lesson. Xiao realized that this time she was really angry. Xiao assured the professor that Teacher Wei had promised to help him get a place in the exchange matches if his track record was worthy. He promised that when the time came, he would personally punish Hiroji so that he would no longer dare to speak ill of the professor. The professor looked at him carefully and said that all she could do was wait and watch. And then she reminded him, "Kindness to the enemy is cruelty to oneself." These words made Xiao think. The sun was shining outside, and Xiao stood there in thought. Suddenly, he met Zhang. Xiao said that he would be bothered again today. He didn't mind getting combat experience again. He was accompanied by an acquaintance named Zhuang Jinqiang, who supplies specialized goods to university students. A senior student worked for him part-time, assuring him that everything was legal. The guy praised Xiao for his talents, but he responded modestly and got down to business. Zhuang handed Xiao the iron balls, so he no longer had to worry about being left unarmed if his flying sword was taken away. Xiao asked how much he should pay, but Zhuang immediately got down to business. He learned that Xiao was going to participate in the ranking matches. He offered a quick solution to the problem for a small fee. Meanwhile, the Dragon and Tiger ranking competition was taking place in the battle arena. Xi'an, who was ranked 92nd, defeated Goma, moving up to his 83rd place. Xiao watched the events in the arena with surprise. Everything seemed daring and impressive to him. The guy next to him noticed that, judging by Xiao's look, this was the first time he had seen such events. The merchant said that his name would soon appear in the rankings too. Suddenly, a man with a sign entered the arena, and everyone immediately recognized him as the seller Joan. What was puzzling was why he was on the Third Ring Road, and that it was not on schedule. He soon announced that freshman Shiao, who had no real combat experience, was challenging the second years of the Dragon and Tiger rankings. He offered 20 E-rank energy capsules to anyone who defeated him, and the entry fee for each participant was 1 capsule. The next opponent's rating must be higher than the previous one. The second-year students considered this an overly confident challenge and scolded Xiao. Joanne, a professional salesperson, used the situation to draw attention to herself through negative reactions. Xiao understood the trick and decided to accept the challenge. The senior student supported him, saying that he was ready. Xiao walked onto the stage and introduced himself. An opponent entered the arena and paid an entry fee, an energy pill. The second-year students joked that Lao Chao should treat them after his victory and promised to corner him in an alleyway if he forgot. Chao promised that he would not forget and that there would be a good celebration after the match. Xiao Lao, ranked 94 and a junior student, was asked if he was ready to fight. He confirmed that he was ready, and the match began. The enemy immediately went on the attack, but Xiao remained motionless. He then threw his balls at his opponent, who screamed and fell to the ground. Walking up to him, Xiao was surprised to see that the second-year Dragon and Tiger ranking heroes were at such a level. The tension in the arena had noticeably increased. Xiao's words and actions had already caused a wave of discussion among the spectators. Some considered him too daring, others admitted that he really deserved attention. When the guy from 29th place entered the arena, everyone understood that a real battle was ahead. His confidence in his abilities was noticeable, and he said that he had underestimated Xiao before, but now he was ready to fight fairly. Xiao, in turn, remained calm and said that the meeting could happen later. But now the duel in the arena continues. The first round began, and both opponents were focused, ready for every attack and defense. The audience froze in anticipation to see who would emerge victorious in this tense battle. Xiao pursed his lips and concentrated. He knew that every maneuver he made with the balls was not just a physical action, but a subtle play of mind and energy. His internal ki merged with his mental connection, and even the slightest loss of concentration could result in disaster. The enemy tried to get closer, delivering quick blows with daggers, hoping that Xiao would become confused and make a mistake. But Xiao was in no hurry. He was waiting for the enemy to open up for at least a split second. And now, the moment had come. Manipulating the balls, he directed them precisely to the vulnerable spot. At that moment, the enemy's mental connection with his daggers weakened, and the attack itself began to devour his internal strength. Xiao felt the enemy slowly losing stability. Spiritual energy was decreasing, and with each passing moment, the chances of victory were increasing. All that was left was to make the final move. The salesman watched the screen anxiously, warning of the impending danger. The opponent suddenly rushed at Xiao with a dagger, but he instantly ended the duel. The audience was shocked, not understanding why Wang Zhu suddenly stopped. Everyone noticed that Wang Zhu had been hit by a whip, and his daggers had flown out of his hands and fallen to the floor. Yanzu landed on his hands and found himself on all fours, which caused amazement among everyone present. The audience's attention was riveted to the screen. They realized that this was a mental attack. Many regretted that this man had not appeared 10 days ago, because they were willing to pay for the use of such mental skills, to increase their endurance, which would give them a better chance in a duel against Azariah. One of the boys expressed concern that if the enemy continued to attack, the entire second year would be disgraced. Another student asked the elder Tsui if he could go and deal with the newbie. Senior Tsui agreed, confident that he could handle it, and not let the freshman think that there were no strong fighters in the second year. The boy entered the arena, and Zhou and his girlfriend watched, discussing the provocative behavior of Kui Shi, who sent Guan. Xiao was upset to learn that one marble cost 50,000, and Wang Zhu had already broken 2. He thought about compensation, but then they threw him an energy pill, which he caught with ease. Tao Guan, who entered the arena, took 7th place in the ranking. His weapon was a bow and arrow, a classic long-range attack weapon. Xi realized that the battle would be difficult, especially considering that the arena was not very comfortable for an archer, and that his opponent was a high-ranking second year. The archer suggested moving to a more spacious arena, since he could not show all his capabilities in the current one. Xiao agreed without hesitation. A girl from the crowd said that the fight was about to begin. The guy suggested mirroring the format for better shooting. The guy supported the idea and came up with a name for the event. Soy Superman, a freshman, is aiming for 7th place in the ranking of sophomore dragons and tigers. The chat was filled with discussions. Some were surprised why a newbie was fighting seniors. Others noted that the name was intriguing. The transcendent type is extremely rare, which made this event special. The archer's unusual weapon also caused surprise. The hall was filled to capacity. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the start of the fight. There were rumors that skilled archers could outperform even those who wielded heat or energy weapons, and there was some truth to that. Shiao watched the enemy carefully, noting the unusual way the archer moved. It was as if he was floating in the air. Using a special technique specific to the transcendental type, it required maximum concentration. Shiao knew that a serious test was coming. In the rector's office, they were discussing an unusual first-year student named Shiao from the erudition class. The rector showed interest in him. Noting that Shiao had quickly mastered the mental whip, a sign that the university was actively trying to cultivate new martial arts geniuses. The teacher emphasized that the boy has strong mental abilities, although he is clearly holding back, not revealing his full potential. Vin Sun Lin, an experienced leader, compared today's students with himself in his youth, and was amazed at their resourcefulness. Xiao's battle aroused their genuine interest, but also their caution. It was not a fact that even E-rank capsules would help him recover from the battles. The rector insisted not to draw premature conclusions. In the laboratory, the professor watched the fight closely, and the robot reminded her to rest, serving tea and cookies. The professor knew that Shiao would now face a truly serious challenge, an archer who wielded long-range weapons, making combat difficult for a stealth type like Shiao. After changing the arena, it became clear that it was more suitable for the archer, although both fighters tried not to overdo it. Elder Kui reminded Tao Guan to take arrows with blunt tips so as not to harm her partner. He asked Shiao not to harm him. After all, Tao Guan had an important fight with representatives from other universities the next day. Despite the limitations, Tao Guan was confident in his abilities, and Shiao promised to do his best. Chu noted that asking Tao Guan not to be hurt actually forced Shiao to hold back, which led to his eventual defeat. The senior tried to remind Shiao of the importance of his words, but he confidently replied that he would try. They lined up opposite each other, and the fight began. The archer began to fire arrows, which Shiao successfully reflected with the help of a protective field. The energy of the arrows, even though they were rubber, remained strong. This was expected for a second-year, seventh-place fighter. Sai understood that it would be difficult to cope at this pace. A girl in the crowd noticed that both competitors were actually studying each other closely. Tao Guang tested Xiao's reaction speed, choosing the optimal position, and Shiao tried to catch the rhythm and power of his opponent's attacks. Both of them had excellent tactical thinking, and Xiao's performance even surpassed that of second-year student Tao Guang. The archer noted that Shiao was able to control the balls at a distance of up to 20 meters, and decided to increase the distance. Shiao went on the attack, releasing balls, but the archer deftly dodged and fired arrows in response. He noted that all transcendental archers must be able to fight in the air, firing 3 arrows at once. Shiao understood that in long-range battles, archers had a serious advantage, and the situation was dire. 3 arrows shot towards him. Although he controlled the silver balls perfectly, none of them were able to hit the arrows that were flying straight at him. He managed to create 3 protective shields, but one of the arrows pierced them all and reached its target. The audience, the salesman, the senior student, and the professor were all shocked by this turn of events. Shiao was lying on the ground with an arrow sticking out of him. People under the video wondered what happened, and many wrote in disappointment that the guy was unable to put up a decent fight. The girl, commenting on the live broadcast, rudely brushed off questions from viewers, calling them fools and stating that even 4th years wouldn't have noticed such an attack in time. The defeat is due to a lack of combat experience. Despite the ability to accurately select a trajectory, in a real attack, small errors and deviations are inevitable, which can be costly. Tao Guan unleashed a rapid series of attacks. His strategy was to have the first two arrows hit Xiao's spiritual power. Forcing the third silver ball to deviate slightly, this was the moment he hoped to use to break through. However, unexpectedly Xiao rose from the ground. The arrow did not hit him, but nearby. He held his ribs, causing surprise among the onlookers because, in their opinion, the arrow should have hit his shoulder. Experienced viewers noticed that Xiao changed the shape of his protective shield. Instead of the usual flat one, he used an arched one, which speaks of a deliberate tactic. The girl noted this clever move and realized that the wound to the ribs was a consequence of precisely this change. Xiao himself admitted his inattention and the unexpectedness of his opponent's tactics, while feeling the enormous strain of fighting in the air. The archer, assessing Xiao's tenacity, admitted that he had underestimated him, but doubted whether he had enough strength and intelligence to endure the fight to the end. Xiao wondered how he could know the outcome without trying. He noticed that the opponent was clearly trying to end the fight as quickly as possible. Deciding to try to disarm the archer again, Xiao went on the attack. The archer, not intending to negotiate, aimed his arrows in his direction, and the battle continued. The audience stood frozen in tension in front of their screens. From the very beginning of the battle, all of Xiao's mistakes and decisions were part of a mutual study of each other. One could say that the real battle was just beginning. No one knew what secret techniques and trump cards the two opponents were hiding. Meanwhile, the intensity of the struggle increased. If any of them were still thinking about conserving their strength for the upcoming exchange match, then that was a big mistake. The winner will be the one who is the first to break the deadlock and use his main trump card. Otherwise, the battle will turn into a war of attrition, where Tao Guan will most likely lose due to his limited supply of arrows. Xiao redirected all the arrows that flew at him with amazing accuracy. The archer understood that before him was a real monster, a first-year student with a huge reserve of spiritual strength, who skillfully holds both offensive and defensive positions at the same time. He broke all plans to find a gap in the defense. The archer hesitated whether to use his trump card because tomorrow he had an important fight and it would be difficult for him to recover. But the fear of losing did not give him peace. Suddenly, a bullet hit his bow directly, at a distance of about 30 meters, which caused confusion and anxiety in the archer. Now all eyes were on Xiao's attack range. Xiao felt that the next move would be decisive. He warned Tao Guan not to get hung up on the distance, but then 2 bullets hit the archer's hand, causing him to cry out, losing control. Xiao hurried to help, but didn't have time. Another guy grabbed the archer, who was already wounded and falling. The senior student scolded Xiao for the risky attack, reminding him of the importance of Tao Guan's upcoming fight. Viewers and classmates didn't understand what had happened. It all happened too quickly. The comments were seething with questions and assumptions. Some said it was fate, while others blamed Kui Shi for being too aggressive. It looked as if the event had gotten out of control, and even the most experienced participants were surprised by the unexpected turn. The archer reported to Elder Tsui that the tendon on the back of his hand was completely torn. The 5th-ranked Zhang Tai yelled at Xiao, berating him for his lack of collective honor and reminding him how important Tao Guan was for tomorrow's fight. In defense, Zhou pointed out that Tao's weakness was to blame, and if Xiao had used the flying sword, he would not have been able to dodge. He considered this an act of mercy. Tao Guan himself admitted that he was distracted by the second silver ball, trying to increase the attack distance, and did not expect such an attack. The senior student noted that Xiao had done his best. Xiao touched Zhou's shoulder and tried to calm him down. Others watched with surprise and respect, noting the younger man's determination. Xiao threatened that if anyone tried to say anything else, he would not remain in debt. The 4th years were angry as they stood in front of Xiao. The commander asked to calm down and turned to Chan Tai with a request. Take Tao away. Guan Yao was taken to a medical center for a high-precision tendon suturing operation. The guy agreed. A senior student approached Xiao and asked about his condition, to which he replied that he most likely had broken ribs, but nothing serious. The head of the senior class felt that now was not the time for impulsive actions and did not blame Xiao since the fight was even. He admitted that Xiao was much stronger than he expected and expressed his desire to fight him, but not today. Xiao replied that they would meet in the arena in a year, which surprised the senior, who commented on the freshman's bravery. He promised to look forward to their meeting. Meanwhile, the tendon in Tao's left hand, Guanyao, was completely torn apart and will take more than 10 days to recover. This was critical, as the exchange fights were scheduled to begin tomorrow. As a result of the situation, the team captain asked Xiao if he wanted to take Tao's place. Guanyao, he explained that if Xiao agreed, he could help solve some of his problems. Xiao couldn't refuse and agreed. The commander warned that everything needed to be carefully weighed, because tomorrow there would be a real battle, where injuries and even death were possible. Xiao explained that he came to challenge the seniors specifically to qualify for tomorrow's competition, but the captain still didn't quite understand him. Xiao explained that his teacher was Professor An, and he would be participating in the competition tomorrow on behalf of An's student, Xiao Xui. Professor An was the same teacher that Hiroji constantly challenged, but she never responded. Xiao explained that Professor An was injured and it would be difficult for her to fight, so he wanted to compete in her place. The team captain initially doubted the professor's injury, but after learning the details, he agreed and promised to take care of the academic department. He also invited Xiao to contact him with any questions and left. The girl noted that Kui Shi talks a lot about principles and collective honor, but she doesn't like him. The senior reminded Xiao that he was required to use the flying sword during training, to which Xiao agreed. Xiao then showed Master Zhuang the broken bullet and asked if it could be repaired. The ball itself is made of tellurium alloy, which can be recycled as a material, but it costs money. When Xiao asked about the price, the seller answered, "Now, 1 gram of tellurium alloy costs 8,000, and the ball weighs 39 grams in total, about 40,000. This does not take into account Xiao's merits." He agreed. The salesman then asked if Xiao was up to date with the latest news and showed a screen where they were discussing a video of him fighting an archer. The comments jokingly nicknamed Xiao Silver Sword. Xiao himself was irritated by these nicknames and called himself Flying Sword. Zhou joked that it didn't matter what sword he was called. The main thing was that he was a sword, and everyone laughed together. Meanwhile, in the rector's office, they were discussing the situation involving Xiao. The teacher reported that everyone had already seen his performance and was waiting for a decision. The rector approved Xiao's participation as a temporary replacement, but he reminded him that he was still a freshman and should remember that. He emphasized that despite Xiao's kindness, he lacked determination, because of which the match dragged on, and he himself suffered more losses. If he shows the same softness in tomorrow's fight, he could suffer seriously. The teacher promised to convey a warning. In conclusion, the rector noted that in the modern world, young people need to be hardened as soon as possible to be able to face the challenges ahead. Huaxia University of Gene Evolution, where the students of the Indian Federation were staying, a team meeting was held ahead of tomorrow's fight. The commander, standing at the table, addressed those present, announcing that he had received the final list of participants from Huaxia University. There were 2 replacements on the list. He used the remote control to bring up the data on the screen. The first replacement is a girl named Che Kanin, a second-year student, a representative of the transcendental type. According to intelligence, she was ranked 18th in the Dragon and Tiger rankings among second-year students during the day. Her fighting style is aggressive and focused on close combat, and it appears she has experience fighting stealth-type opponents. However, this substitution did not cause much concern. The main attention was drawn to the second participant, Xiao, a freshman, a representative of the hidden type. One of the students reacted with distrust to his appearance in the lineup, wondering if Huaxia had run out of worthy fighters or if this was an attempt to insult them. The team leader sharply rebuked him, pointing out that such conclusions were premature and stupid. Before jumping to conclusions, he suggested that everyone watch the video of Xiao's fight today. The video of Xiao's last fight appeared on the screen, and the room instantly fell silent. No one was distracted. The fight riveted everyone's attention. Movements, reaction speed, accuracy of attacks, everything was analyzed down to the smallest detail. The commander turned to one of the students. Azari, himself a hidden type, had to express his professional opinion. He noted that Xiao was confident in wielding a flying sword, and his range of attack was, in his estimation, between 30 and 40 meters, significantly more than average. Mental attacks, according to Azari, were not very powerful, but were compensated for by strategic use and surprise. The commander demanded that within the next 30 minutes, each team member come up with at least 3 different battle strategies against Xiao. It was also necessary to propose candidates who were best suited to oppose him, and, conversely, those who would not cope with him. When the commander finished, all the students confirmed the order in unison. Work on the analysis began immediately. The video on the screen stopped, and the room fell silent. Xiao stood in front of Professor An, his back straight but his body tense. She looked at him calmly, waiting for an answer. The professor asked the student to express his opinion. Xiao explained that Kui Shi's behavior influenced his decision to be restrained in battle. He believed that since they were fighting within the same university, it was unacceptable to deal fatal blows, especially using a sword. It seemed excessive to him. She reminded him that she had already said, showing kindness to an opponent can turn into harm to oneself. She stated directly, if this was not a training fight, but a fight to the death, Xiao would already be dead. Xiao tried to justify himself by citing the fact that he and Tao Guan were studying at the same university, but the professor quickly rejected this explanation. She recalled that Tao Guan didn't even admit defeat after 2 clear hits to his bow. He understood perfectly well that Xiao was holding back, and that was why he continued the fight, not considering himself a loser. The professor added that Tao Guan is not only more experienced, he is ranked 7th among the second-year students, and his combat experience is significantly superior to his. She reported the facts. Because of Tao Guan, in a year and a half, 2 students became disabled, dozens were seriously injured, and 3 died during the mission. His actions were not just aggressive, they were dangerous and unpredictable. Tao Guan would not spare Xiao, and if Xiao doesn't get used to using his flying sword with full determination, then in real battles he won't have a chance to survive. Xiao was lost in thought. He realized that Professor An was right. Tao Guanyu didn't care if he held back in the arena. For the opponent, he remained a target, and this would not change regardless of the degree of mercy shown. Xiao admitted that he lacked determination and strictness, and such softness in battle could have fatal consequences. Having thanked the professor, he left the office, quietly closing the door behind him. Silence fell in the room. Anya exhaled, remaining alone. She admitted to herself that Xiao had shown decent progress during the day. The assistant noted that the teaching methods were too harsh. The professor replied that the decision was made jointly with Teacher Wei and the rector, and she fully supported it. In her opinion, Xiao had made many mistakes, and in the current circumstances, he simply had no right to be weak. The times demanded rapid changes. She switched to work matters and clarified the number of remaining clones. She knew that she did not have much time left. The campus streets were bustling with people going about their business, including 2 students walking together. One of them asked about Xiao's condition, reminding him that he had a fight tomorrow. A friend assured him that his injuries were minor, and with modern medicine it would not be surprising if he had already fully recovered. They suddenly noticed Xiao himself. He was talking to a guy with dyed hair, whom one of the girls immediately recognized as the elder. When Xiao saw them waving at him, he walked over to them. They chatted for a while and suggested that they sit down together. Lin, one of the girls, noted that he didn't seem to have eaten anything, so they brought him breakfast. Xiao accepted the food gratefully, explaining that he had been training all night and had not had time to eat breakfast. The girls then asked him to take them to the inside of the arena so they could watch the match from a close distance. Participants in exchange fights are allowed to take one accompanying person with them. The question arose as to how he could take two at once. Lin noted that the university might be lenient. In the end, permission was obtained without any particular problems. The team captain agreed. Captain Suzu Siter passed on data on the students from the Indian Federation to Xiao, including their strengths and weaknesses. He explained that Xiao was too exhausted the day before, so he was not invited to the team meeting. The captain handed Xiao a package containing complete information about the opponents and ordered him to carefully analyze all the contents. He placed special emphasis on a fighter named Azari, as it was with him that Xiao was supposed to fight in the second duel. Xiao had an hour and a half to strategize. The competition was scheduled to start at 9:30. At this time, the rector was noticed in the crowd of participants and spectators. People began to greet him, welcoming him. The rector responded to the greetings, noting that it was nice to see the students gathered so early, and added that he had come specifically for them. Teacher, bad news. The Indian Federation delegation sent a message that two of their members had been replaced. Almost nothing was known about the new participants except their names. This put all prepared strategies at risk, as previous plans became irrelevant. She said this out loud, and the rector immediately responded, asking if they were afraid of such a change. He added that if such news is capable of throwing the fighters into a stupor, perhaps their strength is not yet sufficient. She stood up and firmly reported that they were not afraid. Following him, the entire team loudly declared the same. The rector, satisfied with their determination, called this a worthy response and moved on to explain the essence of the upcoming competition. The rector stood before the team, his voice firm and stern. He made the basic message clear: live and kill. He stressed that the representatives of the Indian Union delegation are participating in competitions that have the status of national importance. In response to a question from students about the possible consequences of the death of opponents, the rector acknowledged that the question was correct and voiced three key points. First, he reminded that fear is not a sign of weakness, but part of the survival instinct. The main thing is to make the enemy surrender. Secondly, he stated that if he himself is not afraid of these political suits, then others have nothing to fear either. Third point, their actions directly affect their survival. The university will do everything possible to protect their lives, but the goal remains the same: victory at any cost. These words excited the team. The rector gave the order to go to the exit, to the place where the battle was taking place. The crowd stood in anticipation, their eyes fixed on the arena. Every seat, including the VIP section, was filled to capacity, and tension was in the air. The host loudly announced the entry of a contestant who was considered a heroine at Huaxia University. His voice was irritating, but he was told that today everything would be different, and the host would not drag out the introduction. The stage quickly became filled with a competitive spirit. Without further ado, the host officially opened the fights. He introduced the participants of the first duel. On the left side of the arena is a second-year student from Shinin Genome University, Azari, a representative of the hidden type. He will have to fight a girl named Chi Honin, also a second-year student, who is distinguished by an aggressive close combat style. The hall exploded with noise again. The competition had begun. The girl confidently introduced herself as a second-year student at Huaxia University of Genetic Evolution, Honging. Following her, her rival, a student of the same year representing Shinin University of Gene Evolution, Azari, introduced himself. The referee announced the start of the first exchange bout between Huaxia and Xining universities. At the signal, both fighters rushed forward. Conan rushed into the attack, relying on her usual advantage of physical strength. However, contrary to expectations, Azari also went head-on, which immediately alerted the girl. According to her calculations, the hidden type should not engage in direct combat. She suggested that perhaps the range of his mental abilities was limited, and so he was forced to get closer. Azari warned with a smirk that he could be rude even to girls. Chaihanen left his words unanswered and delivered a crushing blow, which he unexpectedly blocked. He then noted that her attack was based on pure explosive power, but confidently added that it was useless against him now. Conan was shocked. Her experience and knowledge told her that the hidden type should not be able to withstand a direct hit from the Beyonder fighters. But Azari seemed to be destroying these expectations. The guy, not seeing understanding in his rival's eyes, said that then he would explain everything to her himself. The girl immediately understood. He was going to attack. To avoid being hit by an unexpected blow, she decided to retreat, while simultaneously assessing the distance of his attack. Jumping back, she mentally noted that the guy's attack range was about 7 meters. Quite standard for those who use mental power. The whip of magical energy really wasn't as powerful as she expected, especially when compared to typical mental attacks. Nevertheless, the guy continued to advance confidently. He noted that the girl had a strong mind and was resisting much better than he had expected. She in turn replied that his attack was not enough to break her. Counterattacking, she tried to strike, but he unexpectedly intercepted her hand. Shining at that was able to not only endure, but also go into close combat with such determination. When she swung her other hand, the guy suddenly counterattacked. His blow was not simple. A sharp spike emerged from his palm. The girl didn't have time to react, and the blade cut her skin. Blood immediately flowed down her hand. Too late, she realized that in front of her was the owner of a genetic skeleton. He chuckled, noting to himself that his left arm was unharmed, meaning he could still fight. Enraged, the girl screamed a curse and kicked him sharply in the arm. The boy couldn't hold back a cry of pain. The attack was accurate and painful. Azari is furious. He kicks her, but the girl slips away, falls, and tries a counterattack. He seizes the initiative, hits her in the chest, blood on her lips. She is immobilized. Azari sits on top, continues the attack. The arena explodes with screams. Joy notices what is happening and rushes to the edge, clenching his fists. The medical team runs in. A man in uniform commands, "Evacuate immediately." Chu is confused, but gives in. The medics take the girl away. She opens her eyes, waves her hand. She is alive. Her gaze meets Choi's. Joe comes up. She tells him something. He passes on the information. A thread-shaped strike. Frequency, 12 per second. Radius, 7 meters. Strength, in the last jerk. Explosive force, half. The captain analyzes. It means the attacking peak is closer to the end of the cycle. Half is half of Shiao's strength. Joe goes to Hongen. His expression is anxious. His thoughts are gloomy. The commander reports, Azari used a gene weapon. That was not part of the calculation. There is a pause. Everyone is waiting for the next call. The atmosphere is tense. Qiu takes a step forward. He is calm. Now it's his turn. He asks to speak to the press during the interview. The commander approves. The arena is cleared. The enemy is ready. Time for the second round. Azari sat, drinking, looking at the ground. Two of his group were next to him, one watching silently, the other bending down to help. His right arm was wrapped in a fresh bandage, and pink spots of blood were visible on the bandages. Now everyone knew about his genetic skeleton. Now we'll have to toughen up Plan 3. Hiroji handed him a metal armband, and he silently put it on. The armband began to glow. A third-generation mental amplification capacitor, rare in open combat. He reminded Azari of Honin, how close he was to defeat. Xiao's mental attack could be on Azari's level. It was a warning. A girl with a microphone appeared on the stage screen. The journalist introduced herself, mentioned the match, and promised to show a new participant from Huaxia. Xiao appeared on camera. He said that there was no excitement. Rather, there was an impatient desire to quickly enter the arena. The reporter was surprised by this answer, but Xiao began to explain the reason. Professor An was seriously injured in one of her recent missions. He is her only student and feels responsible for her honor and name. Professor Hiroji's students take part in this tournament. That's why he agreed to participate, to personally answer the challenge of his rivals. Azari noted that then he would suffer the most. The judge glances at his watch and his face becomes focused. It's time to begin. He raises his hand sharply, the signal for the fight to begin. The loud voice of the judge fills the arena. The participants volunteer to take their positions. Xiao walks into the arena with a straight posture and a confident look, representing Huaxia University. A message flashes on the screen. An's only disciple. Protect the mask, goddess. Xiao reads the message, his face becoming serious for a moment. Azari climbs the steps onto the stage, his steps heavy but confident. Hiroji stands nearby and nods quietly. His instructions are clear. Kill the enemy. Azari briefly replies that he understands, then turns to the center of the arena. They stand opposite each other. The judge raises his hand. Everyone freezes. The tension is in the air. His hand drops sharply. The fight begins. Xiao immediately releases silver metal balls into the air. The balls spin, fly apart, and aim at Azari, who raises his iron hand, deflecting the blows. With each reflection, the balls ricochet and circle in the air again. He uses both hands to deflect new waves of projectiles. The guy is surprised how quickly the aggression has developed on both sides. The journalist notices that the fighters are just studying each other. Azari maintains a wait-and-see attitude, not going into full contact. Azari's attention is focused on Xiao's silver flying sword. He evaluates the trajectories, the density of the attacks, and the opponent's reactions. This is Xiao's first official fight. Important reconnaissance for Hiroji. The journalist notes that the fighters seem to be holding back. The girl points out that Xiao's sword has not yet entered the battle. Xiao holds the sword in orbit, creating a centrifugal force effect. He calculates the trajectories, integrating the balls into a single rotation. The silver sword hovers behind him, awaiting the order. The powers of the sword and the balls are different, but united by a common tactic. It is not yet clear what it leads to, an attack or preparation for a new phase. Azari tenses, a suspicion flashing through his mind that Xiao is deliberately distracting him with the sword. He assesses the situation. The sword is not getting closer, and the balls are circling in a circle. The conclusion is clear. The enemy wants to knock him out with blows from the balls, while the attention is on the sword. Azari rips a claw from behind his back, the glint of steel piercing the air. A sharp swing. One after another, he shatters the flying silver balls. His blows are fast, precise, and the balls explode into sparks. Xiao doesn't move, but there's a calculating glint in his eyes. The moment Azari focuses on the balls, a magic sword flies out of Xiao's hand. The sword is directed in an arc, aiming at Azari's vulnerable point. Azari remembers Hiroji's instructions. Xiao does not kill, he forces him to surrender. Xiao's strategy is based on a restrained attack and taking the opponent out of the fight without causing fatal injuries. The main thing is to dodge the first blow of the sword, then Xiao will lose the advantage. Azari's teacher's words echo in his head. The sword's weakness is its speed and poor maneuverability. The sword finally comes into attack, the trajectory fast but straight. Azari steps sharply to the side, the sword piercing the ground nearby. The blade gets stuck deep, and the earth flies apart. Azari smiles. The prediction came true. Now Xiao is vulnerable. He accelerates towards Xiao, intending to finish the fight with one blow. Azari's eyes are triumphant. He is confident of victory. At this moment, Xiao smiles faintly. Something went wrong. A scream erupts behind Azari as Hiroji warns him of danger from the hall. Too late. Half of the silver ball, split in two, hits Azari in the face. Silence gives way to screams. Everyone is in shock. The audience screams in horror. The doctors shine flashlights on the victim. His eyes are open, but his gaze is empty. One of the doctors diagnoses severe damage to the meninges. The prognosis is grim. Doctors say he will not survive. Hiroji looks angry and tense about what happened. Xiao calmly addresses the professor, smiling and saying that he talks more than he teaches. Hiroji is angry at this insolence. Irritation appears in his eyes. The public is stunned by what is happening. No one expected such a turn of events. The journalist comments that everything happened too quickly for the live viewers. No one understood anything. He asks what actually happened. The journalist explains that Xiao deceived everyone. Everyone thought that the main weapon was the sword. In fact, the key was a silver ball cut in half. An unexpected tactic. She explains that Xiao has been preparing for this battle for a long time. He laid the foundation in the battle against Guan, and defeating Azari is just the beginning. The chat room is filled with excited messages from fans supporting Xiao, asking Xiao to give an exclusive interview to Gene Evolution. Xiao reads messages. The number of his subscribers has already exceeded 10,000. In the future, as the audience grows, he will be able to earn money from advertising. Xiao's gaze changes. A smile appears on his lips. He sees a new path for himself. Hiroji sits on the pedestal, upset, acknowledging the emergence of a strong opponent. He tells his fighters that they need to teach him a lesson in the next fight. Xiao sits on the bench. Teacher Hu praises Xiao for a good win and excellent work. Xiao thanks the teacher for trusting him and not charging him with murder. The teacher reassures him that he can fight bravely at the university. The teacher hands him a gift. Xiao asks if this drink to restore strength is free. The teacher confirms that it is free. Xiao drinks, then the teacher hands over a gift box. Xiao is surprised and praises the university's efforts. A box full of silver balls. The teacher asks him to try hard. The university can't afford such a loss. Xiao promises to try hard and gives a thumbs up. The judge stands on the podium and asks who the next participant is from Shining University. A man with bottles on his jacket steps forward and introduces himself as Sharuko. Teacher Hu confirms that he knows him. He is a hidden type and water class. Judge Park checks to see if Sharuko is a third-year student at Teacher Hu's request. Sharuko explains that he was injured and missed a year, so he remains a sophomore. Xiao and the teacher are surprised by this turn of events. The crowd shouts outrage and insults at Shining University, shouting shamelessness and demanding that they leave the arena. Shining representatives said the problem was noticed late, but they have already contacted the relevant people. They are ready to provide the chief judge with documents on 2 new replacements, but this will take time. Teacher Hu is angry that modern technology allows him to obtain the necessary documents in 15 minutes. Xiao notices that the third-year student is pretending to be a second-year student, and this is part of a pre-planned plan. Teacher Hu suggests that they do without him in the fight, but Xiao refuses, confident in his own strength. The teacher explains that Haruka has ice skills, a spike, a shield, a spear, and specializes in long-term fights. Haruka brought water with him for a long fight, an inconvenient ability for the opponent. The judge confirms that there are no problems with the documents, but warns about the possibility of an appeal and replacement of fighters. Xiao agrees to participate, smiling confidently. He looks at Haruj and says that they, from Huaxia, don't need all this mouse fuss. Haruja replies that Xiao is not long for this world. Haruja watched his fighter Haruka carefully, who smiled in anticipation. The referee gave the command to get ready, and Xiao and Haruka took their positions in the arena. The match began. Haruka splashed out water and began attacking Xiao's bullets with ice clusters. The presenter noted that the fight began with a quick and precise attack, well known to viewers. The man asked why Xiao continued to use the same tactics in battle. The girl explained that the hidden type requires a quick attack. To reduce unpredictability, a quick attack helps to drain Haruka's energy for a counterattack. The man noticed that Haruka had started using ice spikes against Xiao. The spikes flew straight at Xiao, who skillfully combined defense and attack. Haruka actively used the energy, creating multiple ice spikes from the water bottle. His relentless attack was to be expected from a third year with his skills. Xiao noticed that Shiroku used mineral water to absorb moisture from the air. After a series of attacks, Shiroku prepared for the next step in the fight. Ice spikes flew towards Xiao. He jumped to the side. Xiao cut the stakes with his sword and wondered why his opponent had given in. Xiao's bullets froze in the air and fell to the ground. The connection was cut off. Shiroku's ice ability turned out to be more complex than it initially seemed. Xiao knew he had to act quickly to prevent his opponent from developing. He launched the ball at Shiroku from a distance of about 8 meters. Shiroku thought that he wanted to break the ice shield first, and then attack with the sword. Shiroku froze the bullets and created defensive ice spikes. There was an explosion, and Xiao smiled as the bullets hit his opponent's face. Shiroku screamed and asked to be left alone. The flying sword flew straight towards Shiroku's face, causing Haruji to become nervous. Haruji shouted to stop the fight, but the sword was already close. The bullet pierced Shiroku's skull and he fell to the ground. The Indian fighters were shocked, and the spectators fell silent. Xiao remained calm and smiled after his victory. A journalist announced the death of Sharak from the Indian Federation. He explained that it did not happen as everyone thought. Xiao broke the silver balls to distract his opponent. In fact, there was another cunning plan behind it. Xiao created chaos in Sharak's defense, causing a gap. These split seconds allowed him to disrupt his opponent's rhythm. He struck with a mental whip and raised the flying sword into the air. This distracted the attention of the judges from the Indian Federation. In the end, Xiao killed Sharuk with a silver ball. He carefully studied the judges' actions and used it. Xiao was determined to win at any cost.